Hey, Martial Arts Journey Tribe. My dog is already saying hi. Where is he? There you go. Oh, big mouth. So my dog is saying hi to you as always as well. So today we have a cool episode. Hopefully they're all cool, but today specifically it's the third episode of Martial Arts Journey Versus, which means I invite guests who have a different opinion from mine. Usually they're guests who expressed contrary opinion to whatever I published in my videos. And today specifically we'll be talking about Bujinkan and a channel, What Would Ninjas Do, led by George. He made a video soon after I released my first Bujinkan video, criticizing some of the points. I didn't agree with everything, but I think some of the things just get lost in translation. Some of the things I agreed with, but we'll cover that through the video. But just so we would all evolve in the best way possible, I decided to have these conversations again, which one of these we're going to have today, of comparing our opinions and not seeing who's right, who's wrong, honestly, but just seeing maybe we can discover a greater truth together. Maybe there's something that was misunderstood and we can clarify it to each other. Maybe there's something that I didn't get right in general, or vice versa, and we'll just help each other do that. So I have a feeling it's going to be a good talk. And as always, we'll have a Q&A at the later part of the session. So if you're interested to ask some questions, stay until the end and you'll be included as well. So I won't waste any more of your time with the intros. Just as always, I invite you to grab your preferred beverage and let's invite George and let's get this journey started. So hello, George. Good to see you.
Hello. Hi.
So
for those of you that don't know, I just go by George. I am a Bujinkan practitioner. I've been doing Nimpo since 2009, and I'm glad to be here. Rokas, I also want to say thank you for your approach in this. It's not you're coming in here with a closed mindset and shutting things off. You're hoping for growth on both ends and improving our interaction as a whole in the martial arts world.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say that too. I'm really glad you're open to have this discussion. I know, these are, I don't think we're going to have like a screaming match where it's going to be intense, but it's intense in a different way. It's like, we never know what's going to happen, like how we will challenge. We never spoke before, which is also interesting. This is the first time we're actually meeting. But I watched your video, and as I said, I liked the points you're making. I agreed with some of them. And you also seemed like a nice guy, and it's always good to compare our opinions and just grow together. I think that's what martial arts are about. So it's great if we can do this kind of martial arts thing online. So again, it's great to have you here.
Cool. And I just want to make another quick introduction. I have a training partner with me in the background. His name's Kurt. He has his own channel, Sir Kurt Knight of Green. Shameless plug.
But I just came to help. I didn't come to advertise. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But, he studies HEMA. He's one of my training partners, and it's really cool because while we both study traditional martial arts from different sides of the world, the more that we train, the more that we see is similar, even though they've never had contact with one another for most of their development. And, it's always good to have martial artists from different perspectives to assist.
Nice. So actually, before we... Okay, actually, that is my first question. I just looked at my questions. From what I gather, you do cross-train yourself. Bujinkan is not the only thing you're doing. I saw BJJ bell. I saw you doing some BJJ techniques. I saw you doing some striking. So before we dig into the actual subject, can you tell more about your martial arts journey, basically?
Yeah. So my father was in the Air Force and he traveled around a lot. And, when you're in the military, you start picking up martial arts skills where you're traveling, if that's your thing. And he'd bring some techniques, show them back to me and stuff. And I trained him when I was a kid, but I didn't officially start training until 2009. And that's where I paid for my own classes, drove to them, everything. And my first martial art itself was Nimpo Taijutsu, which is the martial art that Bujinkan, Gimbukan, and Jininkan practice. And I know this is, in reference to Bujinkan, but I need to put this out there is that when I originally trained in Taijutsu, it was through the Gimbukan. And these are various organizations that study the same martial art, but sometimes have different interpretations of their execution. And luckily I've had experience where I've been able to train with Genbukan, Bujinkan, and Jininkan, but not as much as my sensei. My sensei is a former Marine, and he had traveled across the world to all these different seminars, training with the different grandmasters. And at one point, one of the grandmasters of the organization moved to Baltimore, right down the street from where he lived, and he ended up training with him vigorously whenever he had the opportunity. Then pretty much within the last 5 years, I've picked up a lot more cross training. And just to list them off, I do HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts. I train European longsword with my friend Kirk. And I do BJJ. I am an official Gracie Jiu-Jitsu belt holder. And I just got my blue belt. Unfortunately, COVID pushed that back some. So I was prepared and ready to test and all that jazz. But with all the shutdowns for the schools along the East Coast in the U.S., we weren't actually able to train for a while. So I thank my wife very much for letting me train my martial arts with her while I had to prepare for my testing when the schools were closed. And I also study Muay Baran. I'm not sure if you've heard the Baran portion.
I've personally heard about it, but I'm sure a lot of people didn't. So feel free to just let people know about it.
So I also study Muay Baran, which is the predecessor of Muay Thai. It's the traditional form where they have locks, throws, joint manipulations, and even including the headbutt. So it's sort of more all-inclusive. And a lot of people, compare it with Lethwei, and they're right on the money for that. There's arguments about which came first. But all in all, I was able to go with Muay Baran because it had more resources available for me to learn and pull the different techniques. And I luckily have a few people that train Muay Thai specifically that I'm able to cross-train their techniques with. So it's a fun portion of that. Now, even though I cross-train, I need to say something very important. No matter what art I learn, because Ninpo was my foundational art, I see all other martial arts through the lens and perspective of Ninpo and how to apply it for Ninpo's original purpose, which is combat with little to no rules, and survival was the main focus. And just a little excerpt that I had to help out with that is that I compared it with MMA. And for instance, when someone trains in MMA, they're often preparing for a combat sport of like UFC or one, and they'll train in BJJ, karate, wrestling, Muay Thai, and different components of that. But when they are studying those individual arts, they always have to look at their end goal in sight of saying what is and isn't allowed from each of those arts in my combat sport, and then which of those techniques may put me in a compromised position in that combat sport outside of the context of the original martial art. So, for example, BJJ, you have to be mindful that certain neon belly escapes would open you up to getting your face hit while you're in neon belly because you went to go prioritize removing their legs, which is a valid technique in sport BJJ. And there are plenty of other examples, but just being mindful of the end goal and making sure that you're training with those in mind. So I do the same thing with Ninpo. It's okay if I learn Muay Thai and it shows this one leg grab into a spinning back elbow. You want to be mindful of, okay, they can grab your back if you're not prepared. If you miss, they could pull out a weapon. There's no rules, and just try to keep an open mindset on that. But my main goal is that I sort of pick the different ranges that I want to work on, make a 2-month schedule, and then pick out different techniques within those different ranges and aim to improve them with that schedule. And I also believe you were asking about my personal curriculum when you had brought that up. And in my Ninpo curriculum, everything is range-based. So just to list off what we cover in each belt of how I develop my curriculum, it starts off with stances because your stance is how you see someone for a confrontation. And then it goes with evasions because if you aren't there to get hit, you won't take any damage. Then it goes into kicks, punches, joint locks, escapes, throws, chokes, and then ground fighting. So we try to cover each range of combat throughout what Nimpo has to offer.
Cool. So there's some questions I will be curious to ask about your own personal journey, but there's one which I have to ask just before everything. I'm really curious. So I released 2 Bujinkan videos right now. The one came out recently. I don't know. Did you see that one, by the way? The new one?
I did. Someone sent it my way.
Okay.
So I definitely saw your first one. That's one I made a reply to,
Yeah.
and then I think that was the one where you actually announced that we were going to have our talk. Someone sent it my way after while I was at work, and I checked it out.
Okay. So, but well, one way or not, your response came after the first initial video, which I like to say that it wasn't a perfect video. I have some problems with it myself, but what ticked you off personally that made you make that video response?
Okay, so I wouldn't say that I was ticked off by it, but I felt that it opened up room for discussion, because these are topics that bounce around all the time on the internet. If you didn't say it, someone else did 5 days ago, and they're probably dropping it in some of the comments right now. So I wasn't ticked off by it. I actually viewed it as an opportunity to help show people what the Bujinkan's perspective on some of these issues were. So the major thing that stood out to me, though, was I felt that it wasn't really the whole picture, and several things were out of context in Bujinkan practice. And I'm hoping that we can go into some of those, like you referred to some of the videos that are out there online. I got examples pulled up for discussion and whatnot later too. But I felt that there could be more context to what was being said. And I'd also like to ask you a question with that as well. So
Sure.
after making your last video and seeing some of the replies out there, what would you say Nimpo is? And when I'm referring to Nimpo, I am referring to the overall martial art of the Bujinkan and the other organizations.
You mean after seeing the contributions?
The contributions or the reply videos, like
Okay.
I remember you read Wikipedia to see what Nimpo or Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu practice is, but after that, did you look any deeper or see what else it has to offer?
Well, actually, I can clarify something here. So I used the Wikipedia to quote. I tried to do my best to introduce people who don't know about Bujinkan themselves, but I was familiar with Bujinkan already for a while. I have a friend of mine who's some 10th, 12th degree black belt in Bujinkan, whatever. He doesn't like to speak about it, but I know he's very high rank. And we used to hang out, and I sometimes would invite him to teach some seminars in my Aikido school when I used to run it. So I was familiar with it. I knew the gist of it. I knew the story of it. But that was my wrong decision of, using Wikipedia to make quotes, to put out some quotes, and a lot of people
use Wikipedia in our homework.
Yeah, I know, but I realized, okay, a lot of people just were not happy about it, so I will not do that again. But aside from that, when I made the follow up, I was especially interested in the contributions that people would send to me as, this is pressure tested Bujinkan. And to me, in the entirety of my journey and these explorations of various martial arts, I started to realize that what matters more is not the martial art itself, but the way it's taught, the methodology, the training methodology in particular. And but at the same time, some martial arts seem to be much less prone to including some of the things in their methodology. So I'll expand just a tiny bit here, but like Aikido generally does not promote sparring, for example, and sparring is not the only thing, like pressure testing, where somebody really wants to get you. I know Steven Seagal does that a little bit, which I respect. There's Tomiki Shotokan Aikido, but other than that, usually Aikido people go hard and they say, "Oh, you shouldn't actually spar." That used to be the case because the founder of Aikido, there's a quote where he said, "You shouldn't compete," and so a lot of Aikido schools are, "Oh, you shouldn't compete." It's a long story. I don't want to go to that route too long, but my point is, my impression is that from the videos I made, from the investigations I made, and the responses I got, that Bujinkan does have a bit of that trouble as well, where that is not necessarily encouraged as far as I can see in the majority of schools. That is not to say that none of them do that. I like the Akban approach from what I've seen, and I think some of the schools do that. But I have the impression that Bujinkan as an organization has a lot of quality control problems. Like it seems like everyone does their own thing. Uh, Super high black belt level black belts happen when they don't really know how to fight, which is a question if they should or not. But that's a bit puzzling to me. So, and a lot of schools don't seem to appreciate, as a whole, as an organization, it doesn't seem to appreciate pressure testing. So that's my impression.
Okay. Now I know we got each one of those as a separate topic lined up too.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to say is, like, for instance, I saw the reply video of when people sent you submissions. One, I will say I did not see your request for submissions. People pointed out to me that it was a picture post on YouTube, and I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, it's actually was a whole video released a while ago where I challenged 4 different practices. That was Aikido, Bujinkan, Wing Chun, and Krav Maga. But nobody sees all of the videos. YouTube has its own way of offering videos, so it's no problem. But it's good to know that you didn't see that video. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, me and my brother in arms, we got a video that I'll showcase in a little bit too.
Okay.
About that we would have gladly like shown some of that. But one of the things I wanted to say is that when I saw the submission video, I noticed that majority people only sent you taijutsu, the unarmed form of fighting, and it sort of reflects on the mindset of what people expected you to want and what they personally held as their own expectations as well. And I say that because we're more than just an unarmed martial art. I listed off in my video the 36 essential skills. We do like pole arms, bow and arrow, horseback riding, poisons, traps, espionage, all that jazz. And with that being said, like it's a really big system, and there are some downsides to that. Jack of all trades, master of none, a little bit. And for the groups that are actually exploring and trying all those different aspects of the Nimpo Sanju Roke, again, just the 36 essential skills, they sometimes aren't as good in one of those realms, but they're very diverse in how they can apply a whole bunch of different other things like blade throwing, chain techniques, etc. And I just wanted to bring that to mind because when we start going through the talks, I don't want it to only be the concept of unarmed combat in mind, but be open to the many different aspects. And I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this as well, being an Aikido practitioner. When you get into the traditional martial arts, it's not only physical practice, but you also generally have scholarly practice. So I would assume your sensei had a few books lined up, and you had to go through and pretty much understand some of the principles of Aikido that were the philosophical key points and foundations. And the same thing is true for Nimpo. There's several books that are historical documents that have finally been translated and shared of like war strategies, family lines to prove that these martial arts were used at different periods, and just the overall tactics of how to use not only the unarmed combat, but the armed combat and your forces and tactics as well for war. So I just wanted to put that on the table so that as we move forward, it's the expanding the context of just not being unarmed combat.
Yeah, well, I will make a slight correction. The video you mentioned, you checked it. I'm not sure if you watched the whole video, the second one, because there's actually I got only like 3 contributions, but 2 of them. One was a HEMA guy, like a person who did a Bujinkan move in HEMA. So there was a weapon included, and the other one was a knife sparring. Which so I think the weapon consciousness was at least in these guys' mind. But other than that, I agree with you that I think a lot of people, they don't focus on that, and they're usually thinking about hand-to-hand combat. So I think it's great you're bringing in the subject of entirety. There's one question here, which I'm curious because so you brought this to the table about the whole aspect of weapons and the strategy. One of the ideas I shared in my second video and something I'm personally enthusiastic about. I think it would be so cool if that would be pressure tested as well. Like, let's say, we're talking about camouflage or disappearing techniques, whatever. I don't know what's specifically there, or infiltrating buildings, and you would have like a paintball game, but not without paintball guns. Some people have to, take the flag, disappear, escape the vicinity, sword fight, and I think like Agban does sparring with swords, but it doesn't seem like it's as common in Bujinkan. So anyway, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's like you see the sparring, but it doesn't capture that element of being out in the environment, using the different tactics. It's when you spar on flat terrain with padded weapons, it's often very sterile. It doesn't have the chaos of warfare. And there are organizations out there that take part of that. I like HEMA, and HEMA often has the people that'll do 5-on-5 with different weapons. Sometimes they'll have different goals. And the thing is that we actually do that as well. I mentioned that my sensei is a former Marine, and he brought a lot of his military experience into my personal training as well. So we've done airsoft operations. Have you ever had the chance to do airsoft yourself, Rokas?
No, actually, not even paintball. I wish, but never.
So airsoft uses 1-to-1 scale ratio guns, and they use 6mm BBs at different weights, and they're often electric or gas powered, and you can have as much as you can carry for the most part. But because of their nature, it brings on a good simulation of firearm combat. The military uses both airsoft and laser guns for that type of training. But we do ambush and counter ambush training, and we've done that. It often takes place at night, and we'll utilize the camouflage and different portions of that of using trails that people have to go through. I've had people walk past you, and there have even been games where, like, okay, one person has a knife and other people have like pistols, and you have to get past them to your end goal. So you're at a severe disadvantage, but you can get a stab in and take someone out and different things of that nature. So it's like they're out there, but I would definitely say it's a little hard to record. But then I don't like giving myself excuses either, because there are airsoft groups that clearly record their games and replay the footage and everything. So there's all of this around there that opens up the opportunity. But we've also done like Shinai and done different similar things like that as well in the middle of the woods, utilizing trees for your advantage and stuff. And I gotta say, like, after even planning for this talk, it's given me a whole bunch of ideas about how to move forward with my own YouTube channel to help showcase these potential training drills and tools that other groups can use to move forward in their own martial arts training.
But what's your opinion about like the general Bujinkan, like the majority of the schools and their approach to that? Would you say that it's more theoretical and kind of scholarly based, or pressure testing in those areas do happen?
I'm going to say it. I hate the answer, but it really depends on the school and the teacher. Because luckily, my teacher is former Marine, and now his current teacher is former NSA. And we like to take all these tactics into our specific training. There are plenty of texts, and I do believe that there are a fair share of schools that do 98% taijutsu and then don't go into doing weapons outside. And I hate to say this as well, but it's sort of a modern problem, because Nimpo as a martial art wasn't really meant to be practiced inside. Some of the first like family systems that we utilize, Shinin Fudoru, was formed outside. The outside is your dojo, and you're supposed to be training in all types of elements. Now, you can't really get these lessons about how to use your terrain and do group combat when you're inside of a dojo that you're paying rent on, and you can't bash up the walls, you're limited space, there's no obstacles and different things of that nature. So I would say one of the biggest like elements is that modernization of martial arts schools. When you have a concrete facility that you have to go to, that sort of dictates what you do inside of it as well. And there are some groups that meet up and go train in parks on weekends and different things like that. So I really say it depends on the school. However, just like you, when I start searching media, I don't see it. I don't see people taking advantage of these group training drills, trying out the different weapons. And weapons training is often one of the best ones you can do because you can either get foam or fiberglass swords and knives and work that kind of element in. But unarmed combat is a lot harder to do that safely in those type of elements because now you can slip, you can break ankles and other stuff of that nature. But I would definitely say that we're out there. There are plenty of groups that do it, but I cannot say that a majority does or doesn't. I haven't been to all the Bujinkan schools. We're a global organization. And that goes back into what you're saying as well later about like quality control. When you have more schools than you can manage, it becomes a little impossible. And it has a sort of a trickle down effect. And there's a lot of other things going on in the Bujinkan right now where we're trying to determine how it's going to move into the future between our newly selected soke for the different family systems.
What's your opinion about Dog Brothers? Since we spoke about pressure testing weapons,
You said Dog Brothers?
you haven't bumped into Dog Brothers?
Nah.
Okay, it's like a hardcore weapon sparring group, which includes like they put like a tiny bit of armor. From what I know, I haven't been to their gatherings. I know some people who did, but it's like full contact weapon sparring, including full-on grappling. I don't know if it's strikes are included, so I'll ask people in the comments. I don't think they include strikes, but like hardcore.
Are these the guys that were using the rattan sticks?
Maybe. I'm not
I
sure.
know that there was a controversial FMA video of people trying to figure out about stick fighting, and there was a lot of blood drawn in some of those.
Well, Dog Brothers, they're definitely hardcore. I think there's some injuries that happen, but it's from what I gather, it's like a fairly big organization, and I mean, it would be interesting if you would check it out, even like after the video, and let me know what your opinion is. But they're interesting. I'd want to. I'm a bit afraid of them, but I would want to participate in some of their classes in the future.
I feel like one thing is I'm open. I'm open to learning and seeing what other martial arts have to offer, and by far, that's been one of the biggest benefits of cross training isn't necessarily the full-on collection of all the different techniques, but as you mentioned earlier, a collection of the various training methodologies and drills that can be carried over and shared between arts to help push them all forward. And I would definitely look into what they have to offer. I could learn a new drill or something that I could apply with my group.
Cool. So coming back to one of the main questions, it goes like this. So some people may claim that sparring with Bujinkan techniques is too dangerous. What's your opinion about it? Does that happen? Do you hear people say that?
I do indeed, and I can understand where they're coming from. And breaking down into that is that a lot of people like to say that the technique is too dangerous. But I need to make a clarification really quickly about technique and use in the Bujinkan Japanese terms. Unfortunately, a lot of people throw things out of context because they start using Japanese terms, and then it gets very mystic and magical. But we have our waza. The waza are the individual techniques. Then we have our kata. The kata are our two-person forms where we're doing a combination of techniques onto a person attacking us. And then we have the philosophies and principles that may be shown in drills or free flow forms. Now, I can do every waza to a person and not hurt them. But by not hurting them, there's an essential flaw. Either you're targeting incorrectly, or you're pulling your punches, or you're going slower than you should for safety reasons. Now, when we get into Bujinkan techniques that are too dangerous, I have a few examples that I'd like to share with you really quickly.
So you want me to? Shall we turn on the screen? Right? Okay. Let me do that for you.
Because I got an example of a classic technique that a lot of people like, Ippon Seonage. So that's the single arm throw. And from here, I'm showing it as a judo move where it's 2-on-1 grip. So I'm moving around to grab his gi, and I'll go ahead and execute the throw. And you get your ippon, your takedown. But ippon seonage is a very strong technique, and it does have some flaws when you do the setups of 2 hands on 1, is that you open yourself up for being striked. So that throw right there, ippon seonage. One thing I'd like to show is that when most people practice throws in their martial arts training, it has lately reverted to being a transition, but not a potential fight ender. Throws in themselves are attacks, but because of mats not training outside, and then there have been rules for safety. You don't spike your opponent onto their head or neck. Throws have changed throughout history. The focus of Nimpo is to train as closely as possible to going over certain things. So what I'm showing right here is that I am doing an arm break on ippon seonage. When someone falls in ippon seonage, you threw them by their arm, it extends, and you literally just leave your arm underneath and support it with your own weight, causing them to fall and break their own arm. After they break their own arm, you often would finish the fight with a stomp to the head. You don't have to go down to the ground and start grappling. And this is an example of how a technique would be too dangerous. But yet, you see me doing it here and executing it and not hurting my partner. Can it be done in sparring? Yes. But from my experiences, you have to have someone that understands the context of what you're doing sometimes for safety reasons. If he had continued to fight after that, it'd be a little bit harder to showcase the actual technique that was being trained. And all I'm saying is that while they are too dangerous, I've had people that I can train him with. I have examples of me doing other techniques as well with partners, and I hate it as an excuse. I hate it as an excuse. People will say that too often, and not only for Nimpo, other martial arts too. It's that it's too dangerous. Find out why it's too dangerous, and then start doing drills and working around that so you can still get the training in and work with some resistance. I got 2 other techniques that I'll show at some point through the discussion as well. One of them, familiar to you, is Kota Gaesh.
Yeah. You want to show right now?
Yeah, I'll show the Kota Gaesh one right now. So let me know, but I believe Kota Gaesh is mostly taught something similar to this, where someone does a let me see if this is the right one. Where it's taught from someone doing a lapel grab, you rip the hand off, you take them down, and you go to do a foot and you break the wrist. Have you seen it done in a similar fashion?
Can you show me that again so I would be 100% clear?
So generally, Kota Gaesh, as it was taught to me, is that someone comes up to grab your clothes, seeking a lapel grip. You'd cover the hand, you take the hand off, you get the wrist lock, and then you take the opponent down and you do a kick or a submission.
Yeah, the ending is different from what I'm used to, but Kotegashi, I think it's a fairly common technique, and it exists in Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu, in karate even. So yeah, it's definitely familiar.
And I feel that most practitioners that do Kota Gaesh in that fashion, here's me doing it at a little bit of a better speed. I had to show my partner the technique, that day to prepare him for it. But most people that train or have been exposed to Kota Gaesh in that fashion have learned it like that. Now, my experience as to what Kota Gaesh is not a submission, it's sort of just like a heel hook. When you get a heel hook on, it's from 0 to 100. But when we apply a heel hook, don't we slowly crank into it because we're in a position that our opponent may not be able to escape, and we slowly move into it so that our opponent knows that their knee is in danger. But with wrist locks, it's sort of something similar. If you're going for a wrist lock as a takedown or a submission, sometimes you have to apply it slowly. And by applying it slowly, you give your opponents time to react and move accordingly and potentially escape. But the way that I have been taught Kota Gaesh is a combative technique is that it is a wrist snap. So in this example here, he's going to get me into a neck hug, like into a clinch position. I block the punch. I punch him in the face to take his mind off of it. I slide his hand off just past my center of gravity. And from here, you have the wrist. And then what I'm going to end up doing is treating it like a snap. And then I go to follow up the technique with a headbutt and uchimata. But like the main principle that I'm just showcasing here is that I'm not using the wrist as a takedown. I'm literally breaking the wrist to remove his method of grabbing to then moving in for a strike. And with that being the mindset behind certain techniques, is you have a wrist lock. If you can get that position on someone and you committed 120%, you could likely damage someone's wrist permanently in sparring or if doing a resistance drill. And by doing the section to give someone a chance to recognize it, you can then potentially flow onto another technique. And if you break a wrist, that doesn't end a fight. Technically, they can still continue to come at you with violent intent with their other limbs. So that's like it doesn't end there.
Do you personally pressure test? So if we take like Koregashi, I mean, I started pulling it off fairly frequently doing BJJ rolls. Do you personally pressure test it? Do you ask for resistance? Do you use it in BJJ?
I do, but I also want to ask you: have you tried doing Kotagaesh with striking?
With striking, it's a good question. Did I? Probably not. I think I'm pretty sure I could pull it off if I would ask someone to strike me. I mean, because I'm becoming comfortable in the striking range. You know, you can go into a clinch and do it from a clinch position. I'm pretty sure I could pull it off. I would still need to do it. I would still ask someone. Yeah.
That's pretty much what I'm suggesting in that sense is that I like to train from clinch. A lot of Nimpo can be applied from the clinch position. Actually, a majority of our techniques are given birth from that location of collar tie up, sleeve grab, neck clinch, any of that nature. A lot of our techniques flow from that point. But saying you getting to that position, you throw a headbutt on someone. Generally, they're trying to create distance from that and they expose limbs. And I try to work that in there. Sometimes we'll get like the helmets with the face pad so I can effectively do a headbutt. And that is something that is hard to spar with because now it's like, will they give me their wrist if I give them a headbutt if I don't actually hit them square in the nose? And this is how come I'm saying, while I hate that there's the excuse of the techniques are too dangerous, there are ways of sometimes doing it with partner recognition and compliance where you can have that conversation of, that's what I did. Please give me your wrist with a little less resistance. If you got to a arm wrap and you did a groin shot, give me a little less resistance. And having that communication. I have no problem doing this with someone of my peers because we've already had some of these conversations and they'll recognize when something takes place. If I were to do this with someone that has no recollection of the technique, they're not going to recognize it. And then I'm going to just still be fighting for a technique. And that does leave room for injury if ego comes forth and you want to win. Because again, we're focusing on like Kotagaesh being a wrist snap. If you grab the wrist and you jump with your body, their wrist is most likely damaged. And then moving on forward through that. So it's like, I feel that it requires balance. Can you get up to the position in full resistance? I think that is a good marker. And then can you do softeners to help you end up into that position? So using the strikes that would say, okay, I elbowed someone in the temple. Can that let me get to a position for this? I elbowed someone up with an uppercut. But when you're sparring with people, are you actively trying to hurt them with your elbows? Most likely not. So that makes certain execution of moves hard. Now, I support sparring. I think that you can get all of these moves in sparring, but they have to be done with some form of understanding of what you're aiming to do and your own personal goals. So I was working a technique with Kirk for doing a Kouchigari. So wrapping the leg from the inside for one of the takedowns. And my goal was under that resistance, just getting to the arm wrap. I had some strikes and other things in there, but then after the arm wrap to go for the leg. So my own personal goals were being met in my training, though from the outside, someone might not have seen what I was working on and saying that other techniques weren't working.
I guess we can follow this up with the question of pressure testing and the possible lack of it. So my question goes as this: would you agree that the majority of Bujinkan schools lack pressure testing? So we can start from there.
Unfortunately, the answer is probably. They probably lack pressure testing. And sometimes it's because we have so much we're trying to teach people that if we were to spend time to pressure test each individual technique, it would be forever before they got exposed to half of what we have to offer. And I do think that that is an inherent flaw of Bujinkan, is that we have so much. And because we have so much, it's hard to get good at a few things sometimes. And I say this because we have 9 different family systems that we focus on. Most people back then picked one and then got really good at that one and applied it in a number of different ways. But now we have people trying to master 9 different family systems that have different weapons in each, different philosophies in each, and sometimes have 3 to 4 scrolls full of 20 techniques each. And it can be daunting as a task to try and master all of them. So I think that that is an inherent flaw that we have, and because we have so much, pressure testing sometimes seldom happens. But if you have a tight enough curriculum and you base your curriculum and your class structure to include that, so my class structure is that we teach 2 through 4 techniques a class, and through that we weave the class to have resistance drills for those individual techniques to then develop the person to cover the material in class with resistance. So there's a showcase of how it's traditionally done, how to do it a little bit more dynamically, and now they have to figure it out themselves and apply it in a similar fashion. So if a class is structured like that, with the end goal being application, not preservation, I think that Bujinkan schools do that. But if you were to ask me, I do not think a majority of the practitioners in the U.S. sometimes have that focus. It's going through the motions, preserving the technique and the stories behind them, but not pressure testing them for their application. And this goes again into the waza and kata thing that I mentioned before. I would say a lot of schools practice their waza for application, the individual techniques. But the kata that have the strategies and the philosophies of combat and how to apply combinations, I do not think enough people practice those dynamically and with resistance.
So you just mentioned that at the end of every technique, you add an element of resistance. Do you have something published so people could see how that works?
I'm working on it, man. Again, I've after having this discussion and working on building it, I want to change the direction of my YouTube channel a little bit to include a little bit more of that. So I gotta let you know. Thank you, because by having this conversation alone, it's been a little bit more brought more to fruition of how I want to showcase Nimpo to the public. But it's sort of similar in how you were doing your BJJ sparring. It just includes striking and other elements to it. So for instance, there's one that a lot of people gave me flack for called Hosoku, which is if someone tries to get a bear hug around you, to open up, stop their base, and deliver a headbutt. The finish can be a few different things, but to open up and headbutt. And someone would actively try to get a bear hug or full Nelson, work their arms around you in swimming, and your main deal was to open your arms up one way or another, pull them in, headbutt, and then you can set up for a series of different throws or takedowns. So it's like I have that, and we incorporate it in our class, but I do feel that we need to get more media out there to showcase it and help, hopefully, inspire others to do something similarly and cause the Bujinkan to grow and improve.
Right. Okay. I'm on the same page here, and happy to hear you say that you're planning to do some more recording of pressure testing, because it's kind of a weird situation that I notice. Some of the people I connected up for the wonders of internet, they would mention like, oh yeah, I have this friend, for example, who spars with Bujinkan, but he doesn't like to record himself. Or somebody would be saying to me, I'm like, hey, can you record a video of yourself sparring? And they're like, oh no, I hate recording myself. It's like, in a way, I can respect that. It's like I respect everyone who doesn't have Facebook per se as well. But at the same time, for me, there's this question of almost like a sense of responsibility. And maybe it's just a different mindset for me, because one of the reasons why I made those hundreds of videos about Aikido, it's not only because it's like, oh, these are popular videos, so and I make money with them, so that's the reason I will do that. The main reason is because I want people to make sure that they understand something that took me years and years of getting to that place to understand, and then they can choose, whether to practice or not. But I felt that responsibility. I still, to a degree, feel it still. But for me, it's kind of almost surprising, because I see a lot of the Bujinkan people agree that, oh, we have quality control issues, or some of them are, oh, it would be great if we would spar. But to find videos of sparring, to find who's somebody leading the way and showing an example, I guess Akpan is there, but that's like probably the only source, like solid source, that I could easily go to and say, okay, this is where I can find some Bujinkan sparring videos. Aside from that, there's nothing. And even them, from what I read, they are not part of Bujinkan officially anymore for years and years. So it's like my question is almost like the way I put it. I'm like, why people are not going with torches and pitchforks and saying, Bujinkan, we want more sparring, or let's have this discussion. It's like, why do you think that that's the case? Like, why is it that missing?
I would say that there is a really good quote from Nimpo that shines the light on this, and it always comes forth to me in my seeking of bringing Nimpo to fruition and its application, is that there is a village on which the moon shines, and for those who seek it, it is there. So the people that are searching for the application of Nimpo will find it. They will try it. They will work through these different pieces to bring it together. And I feel that that phrase holds true, because one thing that I keep in mind with my training, and how come I said I see all my other martial arts through Nimpo, is because I often say to myself, seek what the founders sought. What did the people that came up with these individual ruhas want? A way to win. How did they find out whether it works or not? They tried it. Not just because someone said it works. You should always question what you're being taught as an educated individual, and then experiment. I often have this talk with some of my friends. Is like, for me, there is a difference between martial arts and martial science. And martial science is the applicable approach of saying, can I repeat this numerous times through the scientific method? Does it work? And again, like, there are some channels that are inspiring me to move forward with my approach, like MMA Shredded Jeff Chan. You ever check out his material?
Yeah, we're friends. We haven't met, but we're in contact. Once in a while, we reach out to each other.
I really like how he isolates tactics and then goes into sparring. And the whole entire sparring session isn't about necessarily trying to execute that, but he tries to slip it in when he can, and then uses that video to help showcase the tactics in application. Now, again, it is in sparring versus an actual violent encounter, and that we'll get into in a little bit in our talk about self-defense. But I do feel that there are people out there as well. There is one YouTube channel that I want to get you guys to check out called Bushido Briggs. He is another member of my dojo, and we do spar. He gets a lot of sparring footage with BJJ practitioners as well, and different stuff. And he actually showcases and puts it up. And I have one video that I like to share showcasing that as well, just because, we do our techniques. And there are a few things that I like to point out that are smaller elements that we were discussing and we're aware of, but for someone just watching the video, they may not pick up on. So would you be cool sharing your screen again?
Yeah, let's do it. It's on.
Okay. So we're out in the woods training. We have a cool little training ground up in Baltimore where we like to throw down. So we're working our throws. It looks just like, BJJ fighting for position and different things. But we're including some strikes, and he gives me a little less resistance when we go through stuff. But also note that we're smiling the entire time. We're having fun. We're not killing one another. So we'll often show strikes in play, and we're prioritizing keeping distance versus just going straight in for the kill because we know strikes can take place. Now, portion over here, the emphasis was not to necessarily prevent him from doing the Americana, but to keep him putting his balance forward onto his hand so he wouldn't punch me in the face over the Americana. If you get a few good strikes in, I'm not fighting the Americana anymore. Now, in this one right here, here's another way that we're including some stuff. So this is one that we like discussed after the fight or the training is that I go into guard. I'll end up blocking any of his strikes. I throw an elbow to his groin, and then I'm going to headbutt him in the sternum, which would be an aim at the xiphoid process to help loosen up the grip. But even though those took place after the sparring session, we discussed it. We knew it was there, and we talked about how it would have opened up and allowed some flow. But at the same time, we continued our training to help prioritize what we were working on. And there's one point here that I really just want to point out is that right here, out of kindness alone, this fight went on. We train using our environment, and my brother in arms, Anthony, would have definitely utilized that rock right by my head to bash my head in for environmental techniques. And we talk about this stuff throughout our training to make sure that we're keeping the end goal in mind and working our way through the techniques. And, we get up through and work on counter throws, different things of that nature. You'll see some knees being thrown and blocks. And then I get him with a Tayatoshi, and he countered me. And the fight ends with a strike, not necessarily a submission. And the reason that I wanted to showcase that is because there's a quote from a book that I'd like to share with you. The author of the book is Rory Miller. He is a correctionals officer that focuses on self-defense. He's written a few books on that and has webinars or should I say online recordings of different talks he's given. Have you heard of Rory Miller by chance?
Yeah, Meditations on Violence.
Yeah, amazing book. But he has a quote in one of his books. Many good Japanese jiu-jitsu schools practice free randori. That is essentially no holds barred but limited contact. They learn to integrate offense and defense to use strikes, locks, gouges, takedowns, and grappling as an extension of each other. Now, what do you think about that as coverage as to what you just saw?
Can you say that same question in a different way, so I would be sure I would answer it correctly to you?
From the video that you saw, did you feel that it encapsulated us as a traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu school doing sparring that had both strikes, grappling, and joint locks?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, why not?
But he goes on in the quote to then say, but the hindbrain notices that strikes, being controlled contact for safety, never end a match. Only submissions, conditioning the students to favor grappling. And that is something that I have seen a lot, and it's something that would perverse through other Bujinkan practitioners doing this as well. Because we're pulling punches, we're not hitting the targets we're supposed to for the flaws, the deliberate flaws for safety, that sometimes things go missed. And I feel that, I don't have the answer. And I don't think there is one answer. I think the main answer is to do a whole bunch of drills that try out and focus on different things for their individual focuses. And by combining those, you can best prepare yourself for combat. And I do feel like Bujinkan schools should step up to the challenge and collect those drills. Make sure their students are focusing on application under pressure and work on these skills. The skills work. They're being used in BJJ, judo, MMA, everything. It's just that generally they're modified for safety. A lot of our throws are meant to spike the opponent on their neck and cause them to never be able to walk again. The fight ends at that. And there's another article that I found too that I felt was really eye-opening in a sense about how to bring BJJ back to its roots of combat. It's an article that was written up by oldsschooljujitsu.com or org. And they go over 5 rule changes that they suggest would help bring BJJ back to being more combative. That's like allowing ground slamming, picking someone up and slamming them down if they're holding on to you. And it's viable. If someone doesn't want to be slammed, they should let go. If they don't let go, they accept it as a throw. And a slam should be awarded points as a throw. And a lot of the throws have less points than some of the positions. But throws are a technique of damaging your opponent. But due to it being on mats and people trying to conserve for safety, removing the spikes and stuff, they're awarded less points in BJJ. And there are a few other same things, like turtling is a decent position. However, if you give someone your back, it should count as a guard pass. So it's a lot of different things that can be edited across the board in sport application that could bring things closer to combat. And for us, we sort of need to do the opposite. We're very close to combat and we want to be able to apply with higher resistance to be inoculated for stress. And therefore, we got to start including some of the sport training methodologies while being mindful of the flaws for safety.
I'm curious to ask something. I just realized that I'm really interested in. So you trained Bujinkan before you went to BJJ, from what I gather.
Yes.
And in Bujinkan, you trained throws, locks, various jiu-jitsu stuff, grappling stuff. How was it for you to start BJJ? Did you have a clear advantage, or?
I got accused of sandbagging a few times. Because I came in, I accepted a white belt. Like, it's not one where they are Newaza specialists. They have 10 years or more of Newaza under their belt at times. I don't only have Newaza. I have more stand up and takedown than I do Newaza. So I went in there happily as a white belt and trained, and I enjoy it. It's Newaza specialization. It is a portion of jiu-jitsu and Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu, aka Nimpo. So all in all, it was there, and I still, at this point, I still see some techniques that open you up for a lot of things that wouldn't fly in self-defense. And that's what drew me towards the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, because they wanted to be more mindful about the self-defense application of their techniques. So they sort of like run everything through a filter of, will you get punched in the face? How much energy does it take? Because stamina matters in a fight. Is it natural or does it rely on athleticism? And they sort of like grind that out and find some techniques. However, I do also grapple with sport practitioners as well, because I enjoy it as a sport. It's fun, And I think, unfortunately, a lot of traditional martial art practitioners sometimes hide behind a shield of, my techniques are too dangerous, or they haven't had the chance to harden their spirit to be open to not have their ego damaged in a sparring capacity. Whereas someone that's open-minded is like, hey, throw me to the wolves. I just hope to learn some stuff,
Well, one more big question for me was, and this is on the official list, a number of Bujinkan schools claim to teach effective self-defense, and I made a point of that in my initial video, even quoting some and showing some websites claiming that. What's your opinion about that happening?
I feel that across the board, Bujinkan schools teach more self-defense than almost any other combat sport. Across the board. And one of the reasons that I have to say this is, how much of self-defense do you believe is hand-to-hand combat?
A small portion. Depends, on the situation. I like to say that self-defense is mainly evading a bad situation and knowing how to evade one.
Yeah. Self-defense to me is situational awareness, psychology, and sociology, having an understanding of both. And then the physical portion comes from recovery of bad luck or a stupid decision. And that, I think, encapsulates self-defense. And Bujinkan, remember that scholarly portion, we often follow up a lot of our techniques with being aware of the environment. The technique is about winning, but what is winning? Is it getting away for that day? Do you have to finish the person? Do you have to take them down to the ground? Or did you manage to get in a clean strike that has them coughing and you manage to escape? We actually train escape. There's a whole family system in which you do techniques and then you flee. The whole thing is to cause pain, blind the opponent maybe, and then flee. And we talk about how to incorporate these things into modern society all the time. I haven't been to a single seminar where they haven't discussed self-defense in the application of techniques. Whereas I've been to plenty of sports schools that never talk about the self-defense portion whatsoever. They are 100% like, oh, this is how you get the points that set you up for this. And I was like, so who's the bad guy? There was like, bad guy, you know? It was sort of foreign concept to some practitioners that we put an archetype to who's doing the technique and receiving the technique, who is the instigator. And we talk about like using the ninja manuals or like the Nimpiden, the Shoninki, and other practices listed inside those about how to carry ourselves to pick up on situational awareness signs to prevent conflict, to avoid it altogether, and even to make our opponent feel sympathy for us so they don't want to cause pain in the first place with the psychology element. I feel like that's a big portion that we utilize that a lot of other schools don't.
So that kind of comes off to me as a surprise because you speak very confidently about it, but for me it almost seems like if Bujinkan would be so focused on that self-defense element, there's two things which come up, and I'll address the second one. But it almost seems to me like that everyone would know about it. Like we would have a lot of videos of Bujinkan, like because like if you look at like good self-defense instructors online, they're few and few and far in between. But let's say even like Nick Drossos, most of his videos he shows like some pressure testing stuff, how to deal with a knife, etc. But most of his videos they're telling, okay, look, if a bad guy approaches you, they're usually going to do this, they're usually going to do that. It's like, or situational awareness is this and that. For me, it almost seems like if Bujinkan would really put a lot of focus on that, I would imagine that a lot of videos would be about that. But the videos I see of Bujinkan on YouTube, they're almost always, okay, a guy grabbed me here, and I do this twisty, flashy move, no resistance, and I'm almost kind of like, it's hard for me to believe. But I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just like, why do you think there's that dissonance then?
At the same time, like, it's because it's what the media wants. If I sit to someone and I talk to them about self-defense for the whole video, and then I have 2 minutes of a drill, they probably already stopped watching at 20 seconds in. And unfortunately, this is a reality that many people face. Like, I can say the same thing. Where's the Muay Thai self-defense videos?
But Muay Thai is very clear. It's a sport. It does not claim to be. I have not came to gym. Oh, it would be worth making an investigation, but I have never seen a Muay Thai school, for example, or boxing school say this is like super effective self-defense. I see traditional martial arts making that claim. Mm-hmm.
I have seen combat sports claim to be self-defense. They generally say a lot of different things to get people into the door and to sign up. Most people that come to kickboxing, look for cardio, but they say it's a good way of learning self-defense too. And they're not wrong. They learn a few strikes that would help increase their likelihood of surviving self-defense, but they often don't learn the mindset that's accompanied with it. And as a traditional martial art mindset is like, if you go and study what people teach as self-defense online, you'll find them still pulling techniques from traditional martial arts.
So go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. So I wanted to say, I don't disagree. I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is sometimes guilty of claiming it's self-defense, and they're not always doing the things which I think they should do. If a Muay Thai school is claiming that they're teaching self-defense, I'm against that as much as well. But but those are different martial arts that are not necessarily the main subject of today. For me, if we still single out Bujinkan as our main discussion, so you mentioned something that it's not popular, and that's why it's not done. And there's a story that I recently heard from Matt Thornton. He's a high grade Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but he started doing MMA before MMA existed, and he's very knowledgeable in self defense. But his background beforehand, like 30 years or so, was Jeet Kune Do, which I have my troubles with Jeet Kune Do as well. I think a lot of them don't pressure test, and they have, I think, from what I gather, and I'm still yet to make an official investigation, but Jeet Kune Do has the trouble that you mentioned with Bujinkan. It's a lot of everything, and not so much pressure testing. Depends on the school, depends on the teacher, but I think there's a big problem of that. But the thing is, the story just recently that I heard from Matt Thornton, when he was still back in the day in Jeet Kune Do, he was one of the first people to start pressure testing it and saying, look, most of the stuff we do don't work. And he addressed that to his fellow instructors, and the instructors said the same thing that you said. They said, oh, people are just not into it. We wouldn't have enough students if we would start pressure testing or talking about self-defense. Because Matt Thornton, you mentioned you like Gracie's jiu-jitsu because it includes the self-defense element and what happens if you strike. His organization is all about that as well. Like the self-defense element is included from the get-go. But the Jeet Kune Do community, they said, oh, if we would pressure test and do sparring, people would not be into it. People like flashy moves, and that's why we always show flashy moves. But that was not true, because when Matt Thornton opened up his own school, which was all about pressure testing, all about fighting, it was huge. Conor McGregor is part of his global club, and it's a global community from ever since 30 years ago. How's that? There's another famous fighter who trained with him, Randy Couture, legendary UFC fighter. So they were wrong. They chose that as a saying why we don't show other stuff. So for me, I'm a bit suspicious when I hear that that's the reason why they don't talk, because the flashy moves are what's popular.
It is, because again, like it's when you type in self-defense tutorial, or if you ask someone, what are you looking for? When you ask them, hey, look up a self-defense tutorial, what do you expect to find? Most likely they're looking for techniques. And you and I both know, unfortunately, you will never get good at self-defense from a self-defense YouTube video, because you're going to watch a technique and you're like, oh, I learned something for self-defense, but you never went out and practiced it yourself. And that's unfortunately a huge issue, is that people would see it, don't drill it, they don't internalize it, so they won't be able to apply it. And there's a huge issue with that. Now, by all means, I have like 1 or 2 videos of me actually going over into how to utilize stealth in snow with snow cloak, and how that could actually be used for ambushing, and where it was located in some of our scrolls. So I've had some videos where I've been trying to pick out lessons from the different manuals and show them in person. There's another school called Notori-Ru, which was pretty much risen from the ashes by Anthony Cummins. And there's a lot of debate around him too. But what I do like about what he's doing is that he has a school that is scholastically reviewing the ninja documents and pulling out those lessons and applying them and putting them up on video. So there are people that are actively doing their ninja homework and recreating the skills and tools that they utilize and practicing the tool set. And I feel that the same thing needs to be done in self-defense. But I will also say that I've attended several NIMPO seminars and classes, and it is addressed quite often.
Okay.
And I felt that if you had the opportunity to, if you call up your other friend as another, a testament, you could probably, how much of self-defense awareness and escaping did you learn in your martial art? He'll probably tell you learned quite a bit.
Oh, you mean the Bujinkan guy?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I don't want to be like your only source of
sure.
We do.
Yeah, it's just I'm surprised that if it's so big in Bujinkan, I would expect to see more videos talking about it, and I was just kind of caught off guard that you mentioned that it's so much out there, but I'm
gonna put that in as a video request.
Okay.
So make sure you subscribe to What Ninjas Do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. We can leave this one here. My other question that sprouted from that was, usually people who are aware of what self-defense is, I met a whole bunch of like super high level self-defense experts, and usually whoever talks about that, they're huge advocates of pressure testing, because they're the ones who realize and understand that in a self-defense situation, it's chaotic. It's there's a lot of the adrenaline kicks in. Your mind is a different state, and unless you pressure test stuff, they're very, very much aware that it's not going to work unless it's a lousy, bad self-defense school, but that's a different subject. The good ones who teach good theory usually teach good practice as well. So this is where I'm, again, interested to see. So if Bujinkan is so clear about the importance of self-defense and awareness, or in a way, or maybe I can ask you this way, how likely do you think the self-defense stuff will work if it's not pressure tested? What's your personal opinion about it?
First of all, let me say, one, I agree with everything you just said.
Okay.
You need to be inoculated to stress. You need to understand the sociology, psychology, the chemical dumps that take place in the brain that affect people. You need to know that sparring is not self-defense because sparring has its own tempo. What we like to say is sparring is like a game of chess. Violence or being assaulted is like a wave crashing into you that you didn't see coming. So you have to train for, okay, I'm looking away, you get hit, turn around. Now you have to defend yourself, try to do this technique, try to escape, and different things of that nature. And I would say that the people that seek it, like me, I'm an instructor in this martial art. I seek to make sure that I have the latest documents and texts that can help improve teaching self-defense. For instance, you're aware of the Meditations of Violence. That's a great book. For me, it's a required read for people that train with me because it opens up the discussions of truly training for violence. There's another book that he has. It has a really good collection of practical training drills and stuff. I think that one's a good one to train in as well. But I feel that it's going to depend on the instructor. And it's sad to say that because I would prefer to say anyone that trains in Bujinkan has a great instructor that trains in self-defense with this type of resistance. I can tell you that several of the instructors of the United States Nimpo Academy do. I can't say that for everyone. I've trained with other groups that I'm like, do you guys do this with a little bit more oomph? Will it work under stress? And I've also had some students that pick things up really quickly and can apply it just because they have a sheer athletic nature. And then I've had some students that are a little bit more shy. And then once they were under stress, they weren't able to perform. And I've been doing things in my instruction to try and help bring them up there, to inoculate them with stress and build up the resistance to be able to apply under pressure. And I say that it's not just a Bujinkan instructor, but any martial arts instructor's job to help their students be able to apply things under stress for self-defense.
Yeah, so I agree, but I'm interested to kind of backtrack a little bit because when I asked you the question of, I'll come back to the initial question and just add a few more points. So the initial question was Bujinkan schools, some of them claim that they teach effective self-defense. You mentioned that they teach the environmental awareness, etc. But we both agree that without pressure testing, it may not be enough. And in my opinion, it may actually create false self-confidence because in Aikido, in my Aikido days, my instructor would tell me like, oh, avoid danger, be aware of your surroundings. But that's so far from what I learned when I actually dealt with real self-defense guys. There's so much you actually need to know about the adrenaline, etc. And unless you know about it, you're way behind. And I think some schools give lip service. It's like, oh, just run away and don't fight, or it's just some lip service stuff. They don't go deep. But let's say some Bujinkan schools do. But they don't add the pressure testing element. They don't add the whole experience of the chaos and unpredictability. Is it still, and we both, and you agree that the majority of Bujinkan schools don't pressure test. So is it fair for those who speak about self-defense but don't add pressure testing? Is it fair for those schools to say that they teach effective self-defense?
No. Like you literally set that up. It's a no. If they don't inoculate students to stress, which self-defense is, when you finally get to the physical encounter of self-defense, it is high intensity stress. If you don't train to attack instead of defend, if you don't train to disrupt your opponent's OODA loop, sometimes even striking first because it is the sound choice, the fight's going to happen. You don't want to be overwhelmed. All these tactics are discussed by someone who actually does their homework on self-defense and they practice applying it. There's no reason for me to go out of my way to defend people giving lip service but not backing it up through their training. And generally, students that are looking for self-defense, actively looking for it, and they get into that position, they will leave and they will find a better option. And then if they find a good Bujinkan instructor, they will see that they're doing everything they're supposed to, and they will stay and pursue.
That's something that I'm interested in as well, because you mentioned a few times this phrase "those who seek," and there's a little bit of trouble that I have in my mind when I think about it. And you mentioned that, you know, if a student comes to a bad Bujinkan school, they will realize it and they will move on to a better one and they will find a good teacher. For me, the conflict, the internal conflict is, you know, I've been, we can call, a victim of false advertisement for more than a decade, where I was attending a school where I was taught that I'm learning self-defense. All of them, like a bunch of schools that I went from one to another, they all told me they teach self-defense. The Aikido school that I was in for, like, even a living student, they actually even had like a separate self-defense curriculum for women, which when I look back now with the knowledge I have, it was a bunch of nonsense. It was bad. It's really bad. But they were teaching women, and women were empowered with false confidence to believe that they would manage a real conflict. Well, anyway, the thing is, what I'm wanting to say is, those guys were really telling me that I'm learning self-defense, and I believe them. You know, the whole internet knows that. Most of the people who watch my videos know that. And I saw no reason to move away from that school. I was not exposed to it being bad. And I got a lot of stories of justifications, kind of these intricate mind maps of why actually this is true and everyone who's criticizing is wrong. That, like, it's a sophisticated brainwashing system, essentially. And there was no reason for me to leave it until I started to be exposed with combat sports. And long story short, my friend who introduced me to BJJ, he started telling me about BJJ, MMA, self-defense, and I was like, holy crap, this is very different from what I was told by my instructors. My instructors were antagonizing, and I'm not saying, you know, Bujinkan does that or someone does that, but my personal experience, they were antagonizing other martial arts, saying it's for meatheads. And so basically my point is, I did not feel a reason to go away, and I was stuck with bad teachers for more than a decade. So I'm a little bit skeptical about that. Those who seek will find, because I was searching. I started martial arts for self-defense reasons. I was hurt. I faced violence, like real violence. I lived in a violent area, and I was seeking for answers, but I found the wrong one, and they caught me and they kept me, and took me years and years. So is it really true? Would you like how true is it, you think, that those who seek will find? Wouldn't you agree that there's a sense of danger there, that people can get brainwashed and it doesn't always turn out to their favorites? Basically, essentially, I don't think it's only their responsibility, the practitioner's responsibility to make the right choice. I don't know. What you think?
Okay. So, unfortunately, there's only a few defenses from being absorbed into a cult. Because that's essentially what it is cult mindset. How to influence someone and make them feel like they need you. There's a whole tactic book that cults use to retain people. And saying, don't you go and train or fraternize with another group is a very hard tactic that a lot of groups like that utilize. And that makes it very easy to then reinforce everything. Sometimes cults even set you up for failure so that you can come back to them for comfort. And by saying, you know, oh, those guys don't know what they're talking about, claiming to be the only holders of true information, that's often a big sense of that. So I do feel that it does rely on the person, because guess what? You went to them first. That alone made it hard for you to grow or leave them, because you went to them first. Now, if you had done a little bit more searching, maybe you had a few more options around your way, and you hit someone else first, you may not have ever gone down that road. But the advertisement, we can't control that. Everyone has like the freedom of speech to say they do what they do, try to pull you in. Everyone is selling something, but it's up to the buyer to be able to differentiate, do their research into the specific school, the organization, and different things of that nature, to hopefully find something that's actually selling what they intended to buy.
But at the same time, still, I mean, so there's a danger that some Bujinkan schools, they're doing false advertisement by saying we teach effective self-defense and misleading, just like I was misled. Wouldn't you personally, as a Bujinkan practitioner, would you feel that it's important to speak against that and to actually be proactive and to go out there and say, look, dudes, I'm also Bujinkan, but you're teaching shit. You're a public figure in a way. You have your channel. I'm just curious, what's your take on going public with it and saying, look, we're doing a bad job here. We're brainwashing some people. Let's make sure Bujinkan has a good name.
I think I just got another video request of how to make sure your Bujinkan school is training or keeping like up to par, which is pretty much everything that we've been talking about today. Does it go into the philosophy of what the ninjas actually do, or in samurai? Because if you're not going into any of the principles, you're sort of just training the unarmed combat. Are you going into the self-defense portion? There's a whole slew and list of things. Are you doing things under pressure? Are you doing different types of drills? Are you learning techniques before you get the chance to apply the ones you just previously learned? There's a whole bunch of different things that I can bring up that would hopefully help bring clarity to people that are looking for a Bujinkan school. So personally, I think I will actually make a video about people seeking Bujinkan schools and what to look for in a school to help get the best thing out of their training. And honestly, I think that can be said for any martial arts school. How do you know whether you're going into a good Muay Thai school, BJJ school? I know plenty of people that have like approached BJJ and like, oh yeah, I'm wanting to learn self-defense, and they're like, oh cool, money, student. They get them in there, and they're not learning necessarily self-defense. They're learning sport BJJ, but pulling guard isn't a very wise decision in self-defense.
Sure. So there's one more official question that we both were introduced to before we started. So some Bujinkan techniques look highly suspicious, and they're demonstrated with a partner who completely cooperates. But not only that, like if I add something, like some of the techniques, when I look at them, I like to say my spidey sense turns on. I'm like, I have high doubts if this would be possible to really execute. And that's actually what I even wrote down as well. So I have strong reason to believe that if these techniques were to be attempted with a live resistant opponent, a fair number of them would likely not work. So what is your personal opinion about these techniques, and why would they be included in the curriculum?
So one of the reasons that I brought up Waza, Kata, and then principles and philosophy was for this discussion. The Waza are not being disputed. The Waza, the techniques, Uragyak, Omategyak, Ippon Seonage, Wakigatame, like all these Japanese name techniques of I'm putting your arm like this, I'm locking it, Americana, all these techniques are being done. They come from Jujutsu and Taijutsu. They're not being disputed. What is often being disputed or seen in some of those videos, I believe, are when the Shihan or other high-ranked practitioners are going over principles of combat, and people see that lesson out of context, and they're like, oh, that's a technique. He did 15 moves while that guy stood still. It won't work. I agree. No way in heck is someone going to stand still, let you do 4 or 5 moves, and be obliterated. Would you mind sharing screens again? I got 2 examples for this.
Yeah, let's do it.
So in this example, I'm going over a Kotoru technique called Koyoku. I'm going to show what the kata looks like, and then the individual waza, and then how you can train each of those in resistance for application. And it's light resistance due to the nature. So that was the technique. You raise your arm up, you punch the guy in the floating ribs, you spin to set up for a throw. And then what I go about doing is doing these small little drills of I'm going to do the block as an entry between either someone coming in for a double lapel grab or trying to come in for a punch. So he's going to come in, try and throw some strikes, and I'm just closing distance with raising the arm as a shield. And now I'm focusing on getting a counter punch in. Changing levels, getting counter punch.
can block and I can punch. Now the punch is just limited to the attack. Right now we're doing like 15, 20%.
That's just me talking about the punch itself. The punch has a specific target. I am targeting the floating ribs. If done 110% and you hit the floating ribs with the bones of your hand, hopefully you dislodge it and you puncture a lung or internal organs. That is the intent of the kata, is to rupture some internal organs, get some internal bleeding, then set up for a throw. But the techniques itself can be done separately for application. So I go over that for a little bit, then I go over the throw itself. This is just stepping in front of someone, taking their balance for the throw. There's several setups you can do for this. And this is me showing a too dangerous technique. People like to refer about eye pokes, right? They're like, oh yeah, I poke them in the eyes. It's the end of the fight. I've never been taught an eye poke to just poke someone in the eyes and that's the end of the fight. We generally use it as a softener to help set up techniques. So in here, I'm in a overwrap and underwrap, and I'm fighting for position. And what you'll see me do is show that I'm training to use my thumb as a gouge to help tilt his head in one direction to execute the throw.
I use my thumb in the eye, all set, and push right into it and get to a position where I can do what I need to here. So this is pretty much a direct target.
Skipping through a little bit. Because we also did it from a headlock position. And this is the same exact throw as shown in the kata. So my reason for showing you that one, and please keep it up just a little bit longer.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
this one here. So what you saw there was me showing a kata, which is a combination of individual techniques that has a fight philosophy. The fight philosophy from that technique was to get underneath of a strike, to obtain a level change, to then throw a counter strike, which I've also shown as being a knee. So you can get to the same position, throw a knee, and then set up for the throw. Then to do a step in front throw after having scooped underneath someone's arm. That is the kata, that is the lesson. But then what I'm getting ready to showcase you here is a Japanese Shihan going over a philosophy of technique. And you're going to see him do the whole thing against one guy does one punch and then like 3 moves. So he did a punch, he's standing still, he wraps the back of the elbow. He moves the arm out of the way, he's still standing there. He scoops the foot, he takes it down, no resistance. He then does a elbow lock to roll him around and set up again. He moved offline, does a kick. He didn't even move from being kicked. He steps offline and he goes to move the arm and then set up for a takedown. Now, what I have to say is from the outside, that looks like someone trying to showcase me an individual technique. That says someone's going to go to a punch. I'm going to do these things, take the guy down, and that's the end. But being a practitioner in the art, having been to these different seminars, what I can tell you from this suspicious-looking technique is that it is principles of combat, not necessarily an individual technique to be applied once. These are things that are being applied separately. So whenever you see an extended arm, think lapel grab. Think overextended punch, or someone came in with a sword swipe or a stab and you managed to catch them at a point of overextension. So generally that's what they're trying to show from the extended arm. And then he's moving the arm past to potentially get to his back. Now, that's one lesson. This next lesson is saying if you're on the outside of someone and you have an arm drag, you can take their kazoosh by a foot sweep. I don't know how that wouldn't be practical of saying, get an arm drag. You have an outside arm drag. Legitimate technique. No one's going to say that an outside arm drag doesn't apply. Sweep the foot while moving them backwards. Same technique. And a Nimpo practitioner, having studied the art, will see that and start applying it in these different instances. So this is one of those examples where I feel that something may have been taken out of context in which he's showing how to flow between different things, like flow rolling in BJJ. You may give up a technique to move on to another technique in which you could have finished the whole confrontation then and there, and it's being misconstrued in that sense. So
Mm.
I feel that is a common thing, unfortunately. And here's another problem. There are Bujinkan practitioners that will see something like this and see it as an individual technique and teach it as an individual technique, because sometimes they don't get the context. But I feel that a trained professional viewing this kind of stuff won't just jump to the game of saying that is an individual move. We all understand that there are beats to a fight, and no one's going to stand still while you do 5 beats. They're going to start resisting after the first one, or retracting and going into all these different instances. But I'm just pointing out how these are still frames in different fighting positions in which you can apply stuff. So that is my interpretation of some of the misconstrued techniques that are shared out there in Nimpo that people see and then say that's a technique that won't work. I agree that wouldn't work as a full-on technique in combat, being 5 moves while a guy stands still there with his arm out. But if you do the individual pieces, they then have their application, because that isn't a specific kata of a technique. The kata are the things in the scrolls that were passed down that were effective combat strategies. Those are being applied, and then sometimes they show those principles weaved together for demonstrations. And if you were at the seminar, they would have said some of that.
I see the point behind that and the perspective. I'm curious, do you think that master that you showed, do you think he pressure tests these strategies? So for example, he does?
Absolutely. And that is Nagato Shihan. And Nagato has been a trained fighter. He's done, I believe, kickboxing and both judo. He pressure tests plenty. And I'm hopefully going to a seminar to train with him in Ohio come around October. But with all that being said, absolutely. And he has done all this stuff against resistance. And what I want to say, though, is that it is our duty to also train this stuff under resistance, not just to say it works because someone else made it work. I want to be able to make it work too. And therefore, I apply some of the principles. Like, I practice getting to the arm drag to get the foot read. That was just shown there.
Why do you think there's, or is there, but I presume no, so correct me if I'm wrong, but so let's say no. So why is there no footage of him? So if he's a fighter, judoka, because for me it would make sense if as a responsible instructor, and not to say like specifically like I'm bad mouthing this particular guy, but I think that can be like a general problem. If I present a strategy, I think it would be part of my responsibility to show it. Like you mentioned, Jeff Chan. I love the guy especially because the strategies that he introduces, he always says, okay, this is where I do this in sparring, and look at me doing this in sparring here. Look at me doing this in sparring against a taller guy. It would be brilliant if that guy, if he said, he kickboxes, does judo. I'd love to see a video, like, back-to-back video, like, okay, here I introduce the principles, and look, here I use these principles here and here and here. But that video, I don't think it exists, and I don't think many of these videos exist in Bujinkan in general.
Real quick question: is my video frozen on your end?
Yeah, I think, is it my connection that is bad, or?
I'm not entirely sure. It looks like it's fine on my end, but if you can hear me, I can still roll with that.
Okay, yeah.
So I agree. I like having video evidence. It's great, but not everything was videotaped on all those instances. Nagato Shihan is 52 years old. Our current grandmaster, I believe, is in his 80s. So it's like some of these videos were not taken when they should have or could have been to use as backup stuff. But here's the deal. I'm also not like limiting myself to that. For instance, the same techniques that are in Bujinkan are being used by plenty of other martial arts, and no one's debating them. However, when a Bujinkan practitioner does it, people want to debate it. And one of the reasons being is because as you mentioned before, people aren't seeing enough of Bujinkan mentioned or claimed in the title pressure testing. So that's one of the first things that I think, would like as a solution to what you're witnessing, is that there be more video content of people pressure testing the principles that we are defending. And I'm game for that. And I think several people already are doing that. And sometimes they're just a little bit harder to find. Because like if you've had a chance to check out Bushido Briggs' channel, you'll see him working on several of our throws, grappling, and other things that are used in Bujinkan. If you look at Bujinkan Tasmanian Dojo, they have videos out specifically about how to utilize your terrain in the self-defense situations and how you learn those skills in the dojo. They're a great reference for this kind of stuff. And there are more of us out there, but sometimes we're not the ones at the forefront. Like fame and how quickly you go viral are parts of that.
Bringing up one more official question. So there's that documentary where in Human Weapon, famous documentary, where an NFL athlete sword fights against a 13th degree black belt in Bujinkan. And apparently, based on the documentary, the NFL player wins. What my concern is, I think if we would take, and I like BJJ. I have my troubles with BJJ as well. There's some things I could criticize. There's some things I do, but I like to take it sometimes as an example where if a new guy, even like a huge guy, would come in, usually the BJJ black belt just rolls that person into a pretzel. So because there's a big gap between experience. In that example, the NFL player wins against someone who's technically supposed to be way superior. So I have a feeling you have already something to share. So what's your opinion about it?
Okay. My first question is, do you have any weapons experience?
Myself? I trained in the non-resisting Aikido ways for a long time. I did a little bit of HEMA, but very, very tiny bit.
So you've got some experience with Joe and a little bit of longsword? Or
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to say then, if you've done longsword, you're familiar with hand sniping. Yeah. Which is the act of trying to get someone's hand to get a point and to technically win the fight. But I want to go ahead and open this with a loss is a loss. Yeah. There's no reason for me to try and say he didn't lose. He lost. They chose to compete in that style of game. There's plenty of talk, reasons, and excuses on the internet for that because it was, on a friendly television show. They're not trying to, hurt anyone or claim like something works or doesn't. It was a television show. And some people will utilize that as a defense. However, my personal opinion was that it didn't really capture the essence of what Bujinkan Kenjutsu has to offer. The lack of armor for safety was one big flag that limits a lot of tactics and unfortunately resulted in an injury either way. Most of the Kenjutsu that I have learned and experienced through Bujinkan was part of Kukishinru. Kukishinru is an armored system. So we use armor to our benefit and use shield guards to prevent head slices and different nature of strikes based upon how we go into different moves. And in that situation where people are wearing samurai armor and fighting one another, thrusts reign supreme. Slashes are secondary. And because of that, you could close past potential slashes and enter into grappling and using a sidearm for finishing blows. Me and my friend Kirk have been working on getting that kind of material together. I have a few clips of that as well. But my main thing here was that when I watched it, it was more of point tag. And that generally happens when people do unarmed sword fighting. They end up doing what's referred to as hand sniping while trying to hit one another's hands. And if that's the rules that they agreed upon, it's exactly what you saw. I can't defend it. We witnessed it on national television, But the other context of it is that if you've had your opportunity of weapon sparring, even against pretty skilled individuals, someone who doesn't know anything is likely to get points in on someone where all you have to do is touch the individual to gain points. And I've seen this in person. I've seen experienced longsword practitioners get tapped by people that probably just picked it up that day because they do things a little bit more wild. There's often a phrase that there are two dangerous people in a dojo: the white belts and the black belts, because the white belts will spaz out and do something you don't expect and can possibly injure you. And I think even John Danaher has said more people have been injured by well-intentioned white belts than there have been from ill-intentioned black belts. It's sort of something that happens on the battlefield. So, it is what it is.
This is a hypothetical question because we don't have evidence, but I'm curious to ask your opinion. And so let's say if the NFL player would have grappled with the 13th degree black belt. Do you have a guess what the outcome would have been?
Yeah. If anything goes, and they were allowing strikes inside the grappling and different things of that nature, I think that it could have been anyone's game. If it was strictly grappling, the NFL player would probably have been in a completely different weight class, and may have had. I think he also had a wrestling experience, if I recall correctly, and that would have been good for him too. And I'm certain you've heard how high ranked, well, I won't say super high ranked, but medium ranked BJJ practitioners feel after their first experience with wrestlers. You know, they often surprised or overwhelmed by their intensity that they bring. But I also managed to grab a clip of what's referred to as Gekiken, which is the predecessor to Kendo. And this is essentially what I've been taught to train for in our type of sword fighting, where you have sword fighting going, small slashes may not count all the way, and very often you may end up getting into a takedown position. And what I really want to showcase too is that in this second one, you'll see a takedown take place. And now notice that they still have a sword in play, but someone comes by to remove the sword. Now, how I've been training, that wouldn't normally be a thing, because that's an opportunity for someone to reverse the situation by grabbing your own sword and using it against someone. And when I was sparring with my friend Kirk, we include takedowns as well. So we're doing some HEMA, and we have a small exchange, and then I switch over to half sorting and go in with a bit of a murder stroke type of situation. Not that one. Did I move past it? Yeah. Okay. So here is the correct one. We get into the position here, and what you're going to see is we go in for a strike. I end up switching the weapon around to go for a bludgeoning strike called a murder stroke. It's after this short exchange. And then from there, we're moving in. We started our grappling, and there are strikes taking place too. However, strikes within this type of armor, and for safety, you're moving double leg reap. I don't go to finish grappling. I go to grab the sword and go for the finish. And these are tactical mindsets. Unfortunately, in some battlefield situations, if you were grappling, someone else would come up that was on the other guy's team and just stab you. And there are even tactics that we use to throw people on the ground. And while they're struggling, our spearmen come up from behind and get people. And I just got one more weapon example as well. Like here, I'm using Kusarigama, which is a chain and sickle weapon against my opponent. And legitimate techniques are taking place. I end up hitting his hand, and then I want to follow up. But because of the armor, it's a little bit harder for him to feel the hand hit. He came in with an overhead strike, and you'll still see me follow up with some techniques and focus on pulling out a dagger to stab. But because of armor and some of the different interactions, these things can go overlooked. In the other example, like right after we finished all that, we started doing half sword fighting. And in the half sword fighting, we were exchanging blows consistently in a situation where I would have hit the hand first and moving around, and it's hard to tell when you lost or a debilitating strike. So sparring also yields some of the same issues of training accurately of how you'd follow up with different things. But at the end of that question, a loss is a loss. We all wish, rooting for our own team that he would have won, but I wouldn't say that it accurately reflects what is taught for sword fighting within the Bujinkan or even internationally with other sword stuff. Now, if you're doing kendo and it's I tapped your hand and I got a point and I'm moving forward, which that sort of reverted into of even throwing your sword and I got your hand and I win, there were no follow-up cuts or moving in. The person didn't die. You just merely chopped off a finger maybe. So that kind of stuff goes into play. And it's just how I was raised in the system a little bit differently.
We're good to go back?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I did have one thing I wanted to share too. I think that was our last official question.
Yeah, there's one more official question. You want me to bring that up?
Sure.
Okay, so last official question. I'll have a couple more add-ins, and then will you have enough time for audience questions?
Yeah, I can do Q&A.
Okay. So the official last question, essentially, it's lack of quality control. A lot of people told me about that. A lot of Bujinkan practitioners in the comments read it, agreed about it. So what's your personal opinion?
Quality control takes a lot of work, especially for something all the way around the world. I see organizations doing it successfully. I see organizations that are struggling with it. We can look at Taekwondo. That's all around the world. And if you've ever been to a few different Taekwondo schools, you have really good ones and you have really crazy ones where you're wondering how they're doing so well, per se. But I've also, there's a spectrum for almost every martial art and what they're doing. Now, back onto the Bujinkan. I can say that all the schools that I have personally been to have been good. But I also look into their training methodologies and such before I go there. I try to get as much video information as I can of how they're training, how they're moving. You can normally see how well someone's taijutsu is from how they're moving in film. And sometimes, they're not going over the resistance stuff and whatnot, but you can see their background information, you can see their thought philosophy about how they apply the art, and I entertain it. I go out and I go check for myself. There is no surefire way to say, just by reading this paper, this person is or isn't a good martial arts teacher. So I go to organizations and different schools to test out for myself. I would like for there to be a really good a bit more quality control. And I mentioned this before. I've been part of the Gimbukan before as well. The Gimbukan is another organization that teaches Budo Taijutsu and Nimpo. And I feel that they also did pretty well in their quality control. They would at times request submission of videos for different portions, and you could only take certain tests in front of qualified individuals. And that goes a long way in saying, okay, I've certified this person to test for this certification, of course. So they have a job or duty to uphold that people who pass that can perform these well. But what you're also getting is kata perfection of move your foot 3 inches that way and block a little bit more this way. And I think, what we're thinking across the board is that we want application quality control, and saying that schools are required to have this much application training in their curriculum. They should be having these talks and scheduled reads and stuff. But I don't know if there is a perfect solution. Has anything ever come to mind for you about how any organization that's global could work towards having perfect quality control?
Perfect is a big word, but I do have my opinions. I mean, when you think about, and I'll maybe ask a quick question here, but when you think about boxing, judo, BJJ, Muay Thai, do you think that quality control do those seem to go together for you?
Not necessarily. I've
From
seen, for instance, boxing. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, I know boxing. My cousin taught me boxing. I'm going to start a boxing school. I'm going to go to this 6-month seminar and learn how to box. And then you have people that go searching, like in BJJ, for awards. How many people has someone won a specific competition? I'm going to go learn from someone who has X many medals. And then you have schools that's their marketing ploy is, I will get this many medal holders and I'll use that to then have people come to my class. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the same lessons as those medal holders. I'm pretty sure you're certain that the majority of people that come to a martial arts school seldom always come in there ready to compete. They're sometimes looking for fitness, personal improvement, trying something new, a new hobby, community. And then you have the few that are like, no, I'm here to learn this for real. I want to apply this. If my life depends on this, I want to be good. And those people are the ones that generally seek those instructors that can teach them as well as they can, and they don't constrict themselves to one teacher. While I have, one teacher, I am a student of Nimpo. I've learned from several individuals, and my sensei has learned from several grandmasters, and he promotes us to go seeking information from others and come back and sharing it with the group. And I feel that it needs to be done to grow and thrive.
Well, my take on quality control and the reason I brought up these specific combat sports is I think from my experience, and I would be happy to be proven wrong, but lack of quality is much rarer in boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, judo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I think the reason for it are two things: is first of all, there's pressure testing, and because whenever you pressure test, you roll with someone, you strike with someone, you're gonna see your flaws, you're gonna see what doesn't work, you're gonna throw that out of the window because you will want to perform well, and naturally that elevates the quality, and the kind of the quality control takes care of itself because you can't practice stuff which is lousy. You can't sell something which doesn't work. There's an element of scientific approach there. And also too, and I'm not saying all martial arts should have competition necessarily, but competition also forces that. Because if you are participating in competition, and again, competition is not self-defense, let's be clear here, but if we're talking specifically about quality control, it's the equalizer. If you suck, and I think there's some videos, let's say a traditional jiu-jitsu guy goes to a BJJ competition, and it's just like cringe. The black belt is just like, he doesn't know what to do, he's just jumping around him and scoring like 100 points because what do you think that guy does? Well, that guy can come back and say, oh, actually they're wrong and let's continue to train our thing, but he's not going to come back, or he's going to move on to somewhere where things work. And that kind of happened, that started to open my eyes. I was aware about Aikido not being perfect, but rolling with BJJ guys, sparring with MMA guys, I realized how many things I was told did not really work, where they were actually false. So yeah, for me, I think if the element of pressure testing is not available, that's when a lot of shitty stuff can become part of the curriculum. That's when you can sell anything. You can tell, oh, you can take this pen, and there's a video actually of Bujinkan guy doing that, which I'm a little bit concerned about. He's taking like a how's that marker and showing, oh, you can do this and that and this, and there's a pressure point here and that. It's like, you can tell anything. I can take a glass of water and say I can choke a person out or whatever, but unless you pressure test,
probably drown them.
yeah, of course. Like I think John Wick supposedly killed someone with a spoon or something. So yeah, anyway, my point is pressure testing. If pressure testing is there, it's if I think lack of quality control usually goes foot to foot with lack of pressure testing. That's my opinion. What do you think?
So now I get what you're saying. Before it was a little bit more open in terms of quality, but now when you're talking about pressure testing in terms of saying this works or it doesn't work, I agree. You need to have pressure testing to work your techniques and be able to apply. Now, however, I think we all need to be careful of saying that sparring is the closest thing that you're going to get to fighting. Competition is nice, but competition is sport. Sport is two agreed upon rules. You're not trying to intentfully hurt another individual because they're trying to intentfully hurt you, to murder you, to take what you have to offer, or anything of that nature. I wanted to discuss this, so it flows into it a little bit, and that it's about sparring. So there are some meta flaws to sparring, and a lot of people like to use sparring as a reality check, and it's the image that most people have in their head of what a fight looks like, and that's due to media for like UFC, movies, all that jazz. It shows people fighting in something that looks similar to sparring, but also just like we talked before, a fight doesn't look like sparring. It is most often a surprise. It's most often a crashing wave that you didn't see coming. Whereas sparring is often a game of chess in which you're exchanging moves and tempos. You've had time to research your opponent. You may even personally know them and some of their habits already, versus a complete stranger. You have no idea how they're going to fight or what they're going to do. And you don't get to choose when violence happens to you. You agreed that, hey, I know we're going to fight and let's fight now. Someone who truly wants to harm you is going to choose the best time for them and use it against you. They're going to do everything that they can to put you in an unfair situation. Because if you're in a fair fight, your tactics suck. So it's very often that I think sparring is a good tool. It has its flaws, but you need to use it in combination with a series of other drills to help balance one another. So, for instance, how often have you trained to seriously punch someone square in the nose? Every time you're in training and you're like, okay, this is the guy that has to go to work tomorrow, and we're sparring, and you train to punch him, but you don't actually hit him in the nose. You hit him in like the forehead or chin. You're training to miss on purpose. So you've trained missing hundreds of times that one session of training, and that carries over into your normal training. So like targeting is important. Doing an elbow to the side of a head because someone has headgear on versus aiming for the temple or the orbital ridge. A lot of people like to give flack to pressure points, but pressure points are places best suited to apply maximum force. And I think some people are like, oh, they're magical. They'll cause this person to collapse if you squeeze it. Nah, you just want to hit them really hard there, and it'll cause something that makes it difficult for them to come back to fight. And generally, you read Rory Miller's book. If you're not injuring people, crippling people, or killing people, there's some flaw in your training that you need to keep be mindful of as you teach others about how to apply your art. And this is how come, again, I say that our art works. It just needs to be applied in a series of drills and combination to best prepare people. A lot of those cringe videos of people going into spar, I feel bad because it's like half the time they're not even in shape. They're going to go fight someone that's been athletically training for 6 months, and then they can probably like do 20 pull-ups maybe, and athleticism is a sheer factor in your application of combat skills. So I definitely feel that a lot of people need to be serious about their own athletic training inside this kind of stuff as well. But that whole rant was just to say that, sparring is a very indispensable tool, but we have to be mindful about its application. And for me, when I'm doing Nimpo and I'm trying to spar with it, it helps to have someone that's conscious of some of the more nuanced techniques to help soften and move someone for setups to execute techniques in which there are no rules in how we're training to fight.
So I agree with you that sparring is not an answer to all, but at the same time, I personally think it's a great tool because first of all, you get punched in the face, and that's a huge thing you need to get used to. And if the first time you're going to get punched into your face is going to be in the streets, probably things will not turn out well. The same as with rolling sparring. I mean, yeah, grappling, rolling. The thing is, you get used to being squeezed, pushed, sat on. You get used to having your head between somebody's crotch. There's so many things you get used to. Well, it's true. And I mean, if the first time that happens is in the street, people are gonna probably panic. I mean, panic is not unusual on the mat, but you get used to it. But at the same time, I wanted to also add that sparring is not the only way of pressure testing. There's also training where somebody puts on full gear armor, and like I have a friend of mine in Australia. They have like a warehouse where they do knife hunting. So let's say 5 guys, they have knives, and you have to escape the vicinity. And these guys are hunting you, and they're going like hard. I mean, you have your head to protect to not make sure you don't lose your eyes, but they're like really gonna trash you. So they literally, the person who did that exercise, he said he did pressure testing and sparring, but he was freaking out doing that. They put on armor and do surprise attacks, do full on attacking, like you can pressure test that stuff. I don't know why people are so.
I agree, and the thing is that we do that. Like, and personally, I can only imagine that training drill you said with stun knives.
Sure, that should be fun as well.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty fun. But no, I definitely see what you're saying on that note, and I agree. I feel that type of pressure testing needs to be done, and there are plenty of dojos that are doing that because the instructors go out of their way to research what is the leading ways, what are the new drills that other people are doing, and this is why we promote cross training, is because we would come into people that do stuff like that and then bring it back to the dojo, or take the dojo to them to do some of that stuff and then apply it every now and then in our own training. And I think it's indispensable.
So last couple of questions, hopefully they're quick ones, and we'll open up the everyone else. So, just to clarify, is there something after this conversation? We heard each other a little bit. Is there something that you feel we don't agree about? And also taking inspiration from the videos you've seen, like, is there something where you think our opinions are strongly different about?
There is one point, I believe, and that is, again, saying Bujinkan as a whole. There are plenty of us out there, and I don't want to say that we're outliers. The only thing is that I have zero statistics that I can offer about how many people do this, but I know they're out there. I've trained with them, and I'm one of them. And hopefully, more of us let this be a call to action to get some more stuff out there, so that people can really see what the Bujinkan has to offer in these aspects that we discussed today. So that's the main thing, is like, calling art as a whole. Like, again, I've already given some footage of doing that. I cross train. I steal other arts methodologies to help make my art better and my own training. So we're out there. I think that's my one personal gripe, is that it was calling the organization as a whole, which I'm part of, but I know that it is addressing several groups in the organization.
Okay. And last question, this probably will be short as well. So I'm letting the audience know, and actually I'll draw some specifics. So for the audience, that because there's a bit of a lag between what they see and what we see, so they can start writing their questions. And I think also too, because this is a kind of a format discussion, I invite the audience to also write their arguments if they're interested, for us to look and see, like, okay, this is your argument. Do we agree with it? Don't we agree with it? And to make things easier, if they could write down in capital letters arguments or questions. I'm leading an example and writing something like capital letters, 2 dots. I don't remember how that's called. Bracket. I don't know. Anyway, English is not my language. And so we would see clearly, because and please, the last thing, everyone, be as polite as you can be. I will not publish and show insulting comments or very sarcastic comments. Try to be normal people. So my last question to you. So the question goes like this: if I would want to learn the best possible striking with my hands, I'd go to boxing. If I'd want the best grappling on the ground, I'd probably go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If I want standing grappling with using clothes, let's say judo. So there's some places where you go there because that's what they do. What's the thing for Bujinkan? Why would you say, would you recommend for someone to go to Bujinkan instead of something else?
I would recommend someone to go to Bujinkan to learn to weave the different elements together. So we offer a variety of weapons, but we again happen to cover each one of those ranges. So someone that may be really good at judo may not have striking, and this is an opportunity of learning how to combine their striking to help support their judo. Someone that may do BJJ may not have the best takedowns set up, and we have takedowns no holds barred. Several that use wrist locks for takedowns and other stuff like that from decent positions. So I feel like Bujinkan is a good place of figuring out how to connect and weave the aspects of other martial arts together and make them one thing, with the intent of combat as the end goal of how it would be applied for in war.
Cool. So first question, and I'll comment it as well. Like, sometimes I'll rephrase the questions. So Chris is asking, basically, I think the real question here is, have you been in a real fight? And I'll comment on that as well. Let's start with the question. Have you experienced a real fighting situation yourself?
I've had several instigations that came close to a fight, but I've always been able to diffuse it. I don't chase fights, and I don't get into fights for my ego. So no, I haven't been in a real fight where I've had to dish out damage to another individual.
Yeah, I'll add some thoughts to it as well. I don't think a person necessarily has to have been in a real fight to be acquainted with, to be able to defend himself. But I think that's where pressure testing and having those drills, such as playing out scenarios, having surprise attacks, knowing that someone is going to really go out for you, like having those experiences is really important. But it's like, if a person hasn't been in a fight, it doesn't necessarily mean like that's a conclusion to something. So that's what I wanted to add to that as well. Okay, I'm searching for Well, while I'm searching, I'll put up something nice that someone is saying. So someone is saying that George is okay. George looks like a decent guy, just like Roka. It's nice to have a civilized conversation. Thank you. Okay, someone is asking. So, uh, how many times have you sparred full contact, or have you sparred full contact? Would be the real question.
Okay, yeah, I've sparred full contact. The only thing that hasn't been full contact because of the nature of what we practice are the open strikes where digits are involved. I've done gloves, so like boxing, Muay Thai, striking that's happened, but not necessarily like shoot those to the neck, shikankins to the throat, or groin kicks with full intent of injuring me. So I haven't done that kind of stuff. But I've done like Muay Thai sparring, BJJ rolling, and the stuff that I clearly showed of me and my brother in arms out in the woods throwing one another with rocks and everything right beside us. So, and the weapon sparring with Kirk.
Out of curiosity, and this is again not to say that like this is the game changer, but I'm curious. Have you went like to full on hard sparring? And I'll comment what I mean by that. So one is to go to the cage. The other one is, so for example, when I was training at SBG Ireland, before you would go to a fight, usually you do light sparring because you don't want to damage your head and you want to allow space for creativity. But before a fight, you do like 80% sparring, where it's almost like a full fight, just bigger gloves and etc. So have you ever done one of those? I'm just curious to ask.
With pads and gear. So like I've got like the Muay Thai shin guards, gloves and everything. So I've done about 80% with some people. Yeah.
Cool.
Now the only thing again is just like what we're training for. So it's like you start prioritizing leg strikes versus knee strikes and stuff like that. So you don't hurt people, and that in essence prolongs a fight based upon combat sports. But it's nicer on your friends.
Cool. Eric has some good questions. So besides through talking / lecture, how does your art teach awareness? What does martial awareness mean to you? So those are two questions.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So luckily, it was really cool when I was in college because we had people that were living in the same campus and we would surprise attack one another and actually work on several drills. And I would give out weekly missions for some of my students where they'd have to get from point A to point B without anyone finding them. But lately I've been incorporating some of the drills from Rory Miller's book as well as to increasing situational awareness by like giving someone an objective to put a pin on you when you're in a group gathering, or tailing people with some people in my dojo, where it's like, okay, we're pretty much not with any ill intent, but saying like, how long can we go before someone gives a look? And working on some of those different things. We would also again do missions with airsoft. So having someone try to get from point A to point B, not being found, and that's both teaching awareness for the individual that's trying to prevent someone from getting past them, and teaching concealment for the people that have to get by. So we do lectures, we do that, and we also do drills.
Just to put an extra twist to that, and I think that actually also corresponds to Eric's question. I think you described the way you personally lead your classes, your training, and I'm aware now that you value pressure testing. What about the other seminars and the other schools that you've been to? How do they tackle teaching awareness besides talking lecture?
So let's see. So I've had anecdotes for some of them where they've told me of what they do, and a lot of it is again preparing lecture, but then also doing survival training and going out and doing have wilderness survival training, bushcraft. What we consider like survival skills and basics actually goes into this as well. So they'll do like long treks out into the woods and see practice not leaving trails and being aware of wildlife around them and different things of that nature. You start picking up on that kind of stuff when you start hunting too. But a lot of that goes into play with this as well.
Cool. And what does martial awareness mean to you?
felt like I sort of just answered that with all the examples, but
Yeah, but I mean, like, just like to put it in a
no,
phrase.
no, that's cool. Martial awareness is, in essence, pretty sure you may have seen the color coding system that the military uses. Like, okay, you're in the white. You're at home. Your doors are locked. You're okay. You can relax yourself. You're out and about, but you're being attentive. You're in the yellow. You're in the orange. Something doesn't seem right. You've seen someone with their hands in their pockets. You're walking around the corner. You're in the red. You're actually fighting someone now. It's too late. You should have done something beforehand. And being sort of a Air Force or military brat, I was taught to carry that with me ever since I was a kid. But also in the dojo, we have gone over these types of drills of like, okay, someone's going to try to sneak up behind you in the middle of class. Therefore, while you're training with everyone else and focusing on break falling properly, not getting punched in the throat by accident and other stuff, now you have to also worry about someone that's going to try to come grab you from behind in the middle of already working with someone. Sometimes it would be sensei. Sometimes it'd be someone just throwing a weapon at you from across the room just to keep you on your toes. So I would say the martial awareness and what it means to me is being aware of the environment, the people in your environment, and your escape routes, your potential force multipliers, and all potential tactics at your disposal.
Cool. So Ibrahim question, and I'll add something to this question because basically you kind of answered. So he's saying, well, awesome dialogue with George and Rokas. George, have you ever used ninjutsu in a fight? For your information, I also know some jiu-jitsu. I think, because you mentioned that you didn't get involved in like a street fight, but would you go by the angle of saying you still used your training to kind of make sure you avoided it?
Absolutely. Doing the mirror or reflective surface awareness. There have been instances where, people with ill intentions seem to be walking up from behind you, and that's your cue to pretty much vacate the scenario without actually letting them know that you picked up on it, gauging whether they're following or not. I've used that. I've used verbal judo. That's a very important one. One of my favorite diffusers for someone that is looking to pick a fight, and they're like, "What are you looking at?" I was like, "Hey man, it's just a nice shirt. I was wondering where you bought it." It's you're complimenting them. You're turning their anger into appreciation, and that one's been a fun one to see people's interactions of like, wait, what? It destroyed their OODA loop in that sense.
Cool. Lewis is asking, as he's the only Bujinkan guy who's successful at MMA, what is Enson Inoue getting right? Is it the cross training with BJJ and Shuto? So I haven't bumped into Enson Inoue. It sounds familiar, but are you familiar with that person?
Yeah, one of my peers just informed me about him as well, saying that he is a successful Bujinkan practitioner. And if I'm saying, what is he getting right for MMA? Is that he's training it for MMA. That's his end goal of application, at least as he's training right now, because he's clearly competing. And that cross training and picking up the methodologies of applying the art for the sport would prove to be very helpful, if not essential.
Question from Luke. I don't know if this is a good one for you or not, but would George ever consider letting Bujinkan go for a year or 6 months and train at a few other places? I guess maybe that person tuned in later because I think technically you are training at different places. But you can maybe clarify that.
So I already cross train. I have no problem like going to other dojos. One time I went down to Crow Martial Arts in North Carolina. They had a seminar with Funker Tactical where they brought in, Eli Knight. They had Ryan Hall. Oh, no, it's not Ryan Hall. It's their Krav Maga expert, and I got to train with him for a while too. Is like I'm always open to learning and trying out different arts and utilizing their sparring and pressure testing, open mat and stuff like that. So I already cross train, but I would never really let Bujinkan go because again, that is what drives my perspective of martial arts. I want to be able to think about the end goal and connecting everything together. If I do Muay Thai for 6 months or a year, that takes out all my grappling and weapons application that can go hand in hand with the Muay Thai. So I like letting things combine and thrive versus isolating them. Though I do isolate in training though.
Borgzilla. Nice nickname. Why would you recommend Bujinkan when there's an entire... It's a provocative question, by the way, but I think
Yeah.
you'll have an answer. So why would you recommend Bujinkan where there's an entire methodology called mixed martial arts that has no styles? Yeah, it's a provocative question, but again, I'm sure you have your take on it.
Yeah. Mixed martial arts is nothing new. Bujinkan, Budo Taijutsu, and Nimpo is mixed martial arts. There's 9 different family systems, 9 different martial arts being studied, sometimes more depending on which organization you're training with. So that alone is that it's one of the old school original mixed martial arts in which you're learning striking from one family system, you're learning the police locks and grappling in another system. So I would say, it is a mixed martial art where there is a blend of styles. Even mixed martial artists, they're like, yeah, I train in BJJ, Muay Thai, and Karate. Those are individual martial arts that they're combining for their sport, and there are styles in that sense. However, I do appreciate the philosophy of no style, so you can be open to absorb and learn from many different arts with your specific chosen philosophy of combat. So I do like that philosophy.
Okay. So I don't think I get this one, but let's see if we'll get it together. So Christoph, I have argued that self-defense is about context and relevancy, use of guns, running and survival, etc. In response to that would not work in the ring or against X style. How would you respond? I'm not sure I'm getting the question. Are you getting the question?
Give me 1 second.
I think there may be some trouble with phrasing here.
So pretty much, I believe what he's saying is he would show an individual a martial arts move, and that individual would respond with, that would not work in the ring or against X style. And then he would reply with, I have argued that self-defense is about context and relevancy. And all honesty, you're correct. We've mentioned again that the ring is a combat sport and a form of competition in which there are rules and concepts that would drive a certain type of conflict. Whereas self-defense is often surprise attack, often weapons, you're outnumbered. So they could easily say, oh yeah, the triangle choke doesn't work. Well, that would work in a ring, but it may not work in a multi-person conflict. Or if someone had a knife. And that, again, goes into context and relevancy. So I think I would just flip the question with them for another move that they already respect to show them how they might want to approach application of moves in different contexts.
Next question. Does Bujinkan as a self-defense art employ dirty tactics like eye gouges and hidden weapons? I think the answer is yes. Yeah.
Yeah. They're one of the main things that you may see. Like, I was very questionable of it at myself at one point, but there's this one thumb strike called Boshikin, and they show poking into the ribs and twisting. It gives a little bit of pain, but you're like, man, would that really work on someone with adrenaline in their system? And that's where the questions start to apply from, of like, what family system is that part of? It's part of Gyokoru. Gyokoru uses something called bow shuriken, which are small spikes that you can use for throwing, but you can also hide them into the grip so that when you do this thumb twisting motion, you're actually driving a bow shuriken between the ribs and twisting it, hopefully, puncturing their lung as you pull it out and you kick them. So that kind of maneuver is a hidden weapon that is hidden with an unarmed strike. However, these are good against like the neck and stuff.
Also something we kind of touched upon, but just to bring more clarity. So Gingercore says, I used to do Bujinkan in Argentina, and there were some training boot camps every year where we did exercises in stealth and combat. Are they common in other countries?
I can say I've done it. So that would say yes, but I can't say I've also trained with Bujinkan in Canada or Mexico yet. I can only hope that there are people that are so thrilled about what Bujinkan has to offer that they seek in learning and providing that experience to their students.
So argument, this is an interesting one to ask you if this is true or not, if you heard about it. As far as finding the videos of sparring, all Bujinkan members were given a mandate to not post videos online in the early 2000s. Have you ever heard about something like that? This is the first time I'm hearing that.
That was before my time. But I can say that when I was part of the Gimbukan, that I have heard on several occasions that video content needed to be approved before being uploaded. Because if it would affect, I guess that's the Gimbukan's method of quality control of potential video output. So if that's true, it would explain some stuff. But I joined in 2009, and I haven't heard anyone in particular say that to me.
That also brings up a question from me, which I'm interested to ask you quickly about. I made a post recently, like a community post on YouTube. You might have not seen it, but this Bujinkan commercial keeps appearing on my Instagram feed all the time, which is bugging me. But it's like a white belt to black belt curriculum, and it says like, I think the quote is like, become a black belt through going through this course, and it kind of like advertises, learn like what a black belt needs to learn. Like, what's your opinion when you see such?
I think I've seen the advertisement that you're talking about, and if you talk to anyone, the often response is that you can't learn Nimpo through video. That's often one of the quickest defenses that someone will drop out. I also don't like that, because I feel that if someone is a good enough teacher that you can learn, it's about your personal application and training. However, I think any online strictly from white belt to black belt is probably something you should steer away from, and maybe the induction into some of the situations that we're talking about of manipulating that information so that they stop checking out other groups and stuff. So I would say be mindful of that kind of thing.
Jorik or Yorik, I don't know how to pronounce this one. How do you think a decent amateur boxer would do against a Bujinkan practitioner who's a black belt? What would you say?
Well, if the black belt has done conditioning, and he also what was it? Decent amateur boxer. Okay, if the black belt has conditioning, he'll probably try to bypass the boxing and go to grappling. And if the boxer has no experience in grappling, as you guys have already seen in a lot of other instances, it changes the whole entire fight. But if a boxer were to challenge a Bujinkan practitioner and they accept to box them, they're probably going to wipe the floor with them. That's their game. So there's a bit of that, and we often like to invite them to the other side of the world. So it's like, okay, so you'd like me to do boxing? Would you come out and do naginata with me? And they often never want to do the other end, and so it's sort of unfair, because like I have no problem doing the boxing to experiment and learn from this individual, but I want to also offer the other end, and seldom do the combat sports practitioners want to partake in some of the other unwell-known aspects of our art. Because I think it'd be pretty fun for someone to learn, like, okay, here's how you do archery, and here's how you can do it from horse, but you have to be mindful of not getting knocked down by a spear. Maybe it's not everyone's cup of tea.
I'll add a follow-up question to that. A hypothetical one. Again, I'm curious about your opinion. So we can, even to make it easier, put Bujinkan aside and just take any martial art, including Bujinkan, but it can be anyone. So not particularly aiming at Bujinkan. But so someone who's a black belt but never pressure tested their stuff, and they go against decent boxer. Okay.
Decent boxer. It's literally saying, if no one has ever done anything against resistance ever versus this person who's been going against resistance for 1 year, the person with resistance is going to win. They've trained their mind. They're used to the chemical dump. They've gotten hit in the face. So all that stuff, as we mentioned before, is important. You need to get inoculated to stress and application. And so as long as the practitioners doing that, I'd feel confident in their skills too.
So before I pull up another question, unfortunately, I have to say that some of the questions, like as soon as it gets to a certain point, some of those comments from the stream that I see disappear, so they get cut off. So sorry, everyone. Some of you may need to retype your questions. There was one which I didn't have a chance to pull out quickly. It was one directed to me, and I just wanted to put it on record. Someone was asking about the Bujinkan school in Lithuania, my country, and if I'm planning to go there sometime. I just wanted to put on record that yes, it's led by a friend of mine who we know each other for a while, and I asked him if he would agree for me to come in and train and also even like do some recordings. He agreed. So it's all about scheduling, but it's down to happen sometime sooner or later. Yeah.
I know Rokus.
Yeah.
I saw that portion on the video and whatnot. Where it's like, okay, he's gonna like slam you down in the ground or whatever business. If you ever find yourself in the U.S. near D.C. or Maryland, the capital of the USA, let me know. I would be more than happy to have like a few days of training with you or whatever. And I know some of my guys would like to as well. Not with any ill intent, but honestly, I think it would be a fun experience. That's all.
Cool. Thank you. Actually, are you in Baltimore?
My friend Anthony, he's in Baltimore. I'm in Prince George's County, which is like right outside DC.
Okay, because I'm planning to. Baltimore is on my list because there's a Shotokan competitive Aikido person who's there, which I would like to visit. So maybe I'll drop by. Who knows? But obviously after pandemic is over.
Okay. Yeah. Just let us know. You got my email.
Cool. So thank you for the invitation. Okay, I didn't have a chance to really dig into this one. Let's see if it's a good one. So, sir, would you consider to train more hardcore arts as Roka's experienced after Aikido? I guess we just can, because some people just tune in, in random times.
Yeah, we already do.
Yeah, that you train BJJ, you train some striking arts, so it's not like you haven't done that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this is an interesting one. Why do ninjutsu, and ninjutsu is not entirely Bujinkan, but I guess applies to Bujinkan as well. Why? So, but let's say we say it like that. So, why do ninjutsu practitioners train in the gi when you won't be wearing a gi in a real life situation? Do you ever train wearing jackets, hoodies, etc.? It's an interesting question.
Okay, so I think this is a fun one. If you check out my channel, What Would Ninjas Do, you'll see us training in street clothes out on pavement all the time. I have no problem training on pavement, and I think more people need to. You know why? Because 70% of the time that you're walking is on pavement and hard surfaces. It's important to train on. But in regards to the gi, we do wear gi, and they're black gi. I want to point that out is that I haven't found any like justification as into we wear black gi because we want to look like ninja. If you were to ask me why I wear black gi, it's because grass stains and blood come out of it a lot easier than a white gi or blue gi. And we do wear gi because gi are training clothes. The likelihood of you fighting someone on a hard surface is probably equal to the likelihood of you fighting another clothed individual. And therefore, by training with training clothes that don't rip every time you go to do a throw, it's good. But for example, like throwing someone with a shirt, you would say that it would rip. But we teach to get in there and then clump up as much as the fabric as possible to give you a legitimate grip that won't necessarily rip the shirt on the first throw execution and can be used for chokes and etc. And just like in BJJ, learning to use your own clothes to choke other individuals. It has its advantages, and I don't see why I would neglect using my opponent's worn weapon or my worn weapon against them.
There's an add-on question there from my end. Again, curiosity. It makes sense. You mentioned, black gi, blood stains, grass, but you also wore cool ninja shoes in your videos that you showed. What's the justification there?
So those are called jikatabi. Jikatabi are an older style of shoe found in Japan. The way that they are worn now is pretty modernized. The Japan's workforce still wears them today. They even make hard toe versions. But if you ask companies who buys the most ninja shoes in Japan, it's ninjutsu practitioners and construction workers. Now, the science behind it, I wish I had an article for this. There is one out there, but it goes into the science of how the space between the toe actually affects the gait of how someone's able to run. And by focusing a little bit more.
Oh, we just lost someone. Let me see. Hopefully George will come back. Maybe it's a temporary burnout of the battery or something. Well, we wouldn't have been on for a long time anymore, one way or another. Meanwhile, let's give a few minutes for him to potentially come back. There we go. So you want to continue, George?
That was new. But apparently it affects the gait. If I can find the article. It'd be cool to share with everyone again. But also the shoes that they did wear were like woven sandals. I actually have a pair in my closet that provide a little bit of thickness, and having the ability to use your toes to grab things, you're able to actually fling shuriken and other stuff from your feet. So that's a benefit of it. Um, and I believe the Vibram shoe company with the split toes also starts going into how the benefits of separating your toes is useful in daily movement practices.
Cool. So Vinicius, so I think it's a good question. Has Bujinkan ever modernized itself? Would an eventual new socket ever do it? I guess it would need some clarification of what is meant by modernized, but I think we can also make a fair guess. So what would be your answer to the
I
question?
think I get the energy in which he's pushing out, and the answer is yes. There are Goshin Jutsu practitioners that have been like approved through the Gimmikan. Goshin Jutsu is like supposedly the self-defense application of traditional techniques, but there are higher ranked Bujinkan members that teach like tactical driving, gun disarms, and working with law enforcement to help work them on that kind of stuff. And like here's the interesting thing. Someone had asked me, how are gun disarms in a traditional martial art? And the reason is because we are attempting to still be modern and grow. If a gun is a threat in which you are likely to encounter, it is best to know something rather than nothing. And we go through the whole psychology of like, okay, what do you want? Wiggling fingers, redirecting attention. If it's something, fine, just giving them what they want. If it's them trying to remove us to secondary location, trying to actually disarm the gun and flee. But a lot of the gun disarms and things of that nature are pulled from our traditional knife tactics and sometimes disarms of swords, because you can only hold a weapon in so many different ways. The way that you hold a gun is very similar to how you hold a sword, to how you hold a naginata and staff and different things, and using those principles against you. The only new thing is the trigger finger. And there are some older school gun tactics as well, because Nimpo was around when flintlock rifles were being made, and there are tactics of like using the bayonets and rushing in that kind of situation too.
Giordani is asking, what is your opinion about Frank? And I think it's pronounced Dukes, but I like to say Ducks. That's a mistake I made, but a lot of people loved it. So what do you think about the guy?
Yeah, there's a lot of contrary information, contradicting information between individuals on that. I will say this: I haven't been around long enough. I'm only 29, and most of that interaction was before my time. I have never met the person or seen him specifically move. I've heard people say good things about him. I've heard people say bad things about him. So I don't want to offer an opinion on someone I haven't personally met.
So Raphael is asking about Anthony Cummins. You mentioned him, so I'm sure you know him. What's your opinion about his historical and critical view on ninjutsu?
I like it and I hate it. And one of the reasons I say this is because I really appreciate the work that he's done to decode and share the information of the historical ninja texts. And I gotta say ninja and samurai texts, because they're really nice additions to my library. I flip through them. I try to get some different lessons and practice different applications from them. But there have also been like, claims from another part of saying, okay, there were no ninja martial arts, and people try to put that out there. But now that there's a new book called The Hidden Lineage, which connects one of our older Ruhas throughout a history, showing that it did exist and it was used. So there are a lot of debates on historical context of this type of material, but I find myself more enthused for the application and use of the physical skills now. So it's like even going over the traditional tactics and stuff, I find it fun, but I'm always like, okay, I'm never probably going to lead an army of 20 or to 200 samurai for this. How can I apply this in my modern day life or at work,
Cool. Kevin is saying historical evidence pointing to the ninja being assassins as their main job and role. Historical evidence points to espionage as their actual job. Do you know anything about it?
Yes. From the majority of information and readings that I've had, the main job of the shinobi is translated in their name, Masters of Gathering Information. So it was definitely a little bit more on the espionage side, but at the same time, there were people that performed as both samurai and ninja throughout history. You can check out the Hanzo lineage for a little bit more information on that. But espionage was a big thing. Sometimes you could literally just be sent to a place to go be a fisherman for 5 years, never have to use self-defense, and just pass on notes to people hidden inside your fish. And that could have been a legitimate ninja mission for 5 years, and you were done after that. You know, so there are. I definitely say it's heavier on the side of espionage and assassins. Like, I'm pretty sure there are historical records behind it, but I would say that they're probably a lot less of that than the espionage jobs. And there are easy things of like saying, okay, set their armory on fire. When is the Lord leaving the castle? Different small things like that go a long way in information warfare.
Black Omega with another question. Do ninjutsu practitioners work on improvised weapons training very often? I feel this is a neglected element of many martial arts.
Yes. And sometimes I think they do it very well. Sometimes I don't think they do it so well. So like the example that Rokas brought up of using the marker for grabbing people. I know what you're talking about. It's essentially saying by putting the pin or tool in between your hand, you have a thing that can apply pain while grabbing. However, that's, I believe, thrown a little out of context. It's based off of an older karate weapon, which was literally just a block of wood with a loop that you'd slide your finger through, and you would use that for heavy striking to bony areas. So if like you struck to the back of someone's hand with that, you could rupture the metacarpals and they can't grab you. And by the time you'd realize it already happened, the rest of the fight's ensuing. You could still punch with it. It was used in context of being a force multiplier, not their individual weapon. So again, that one I think depends on the practitioner and whether or not their sensei instilled that lesson inside them. We have several people that train Kusari Fundo, which is a weighted chain weapon that just use 2 padlocks and a chain to practice that kind of stuff and work on they work in automotive. They'll have 2 wrenches in a chain that are easily connected that they could technically utilize if they wanted to. So people do practice it.
Luca, so I think he's referring to when you mentioned that against a boxer you would use grappling. Would you be using BJJ, or is your grappling different from BJJ? I think that's the question.
A lot of people like to say BJJ and regular grappling. I think what would honestly help a lot of people understand the situation better is if we call BJJ what it is, and that is newaza. It is ground fighting. When you train in judo and you learn techniques that focus on the ground, it's called newaza. Newaza, it comes from traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu, just like all of judo did. They modified some things for safety and to focus on the sportive aspect. And then they even removed a lot of throws and takedowns because wrestlers were utilizing it in their sport and removing from the aesthetics of judo. They made certain grips illegal and different things of that nature. So the root of all those arts, of BJJ, of judo, comes from traditional jiu-jitsu, and therefore we have the same techniques. However, this is where it gets really cool too, and why I also like doing BJJ. While BJJ comes from traditional jiu-jitsu and our arts, it has also developed into its own thing. You have techniques that exist now that were not being utilized back then. Things became popular, dived into deeper with different focuses, and I felt that opens a new realm of deeper incorporation back into our art. So when I learned BJJ, I go there with the intention of how can I apply this back to Ninpo, and if I see that it works and it respects punching and weapons, I generally add it to what we do.
Stephen, it's a bit of an assumption and something that we already kind of discussed about, but for the sake of argument, why is the average Bujinkan school quality so poor compared to BJJ Muay Thai boxing schools?
sometimes I personally wonder if it's about individual passion. I'm excited about this stuff. I like sharing it with people. I like to go in as deep as possible with the material, and I want to be better at it. Um, when I'm an instructor, I still want to be a student. I want to grow, and therefore I seek that growth. I think sometimes people get complacent with what they were teaching. We've always done it that way. This is how I was taught, and sometimes they stall their own growth, and I feel that that can sometimes lead to the stagnation and beginnings of poor quality. If people are really hungry for applying the art and improving themselves, I think the art will only grow better as well. And then you would have a higher quality of Bujinkan practitioners.
There's an interesting question I find from Christoph. As a traditional style, does Bujinkan can prove to have a proper lineage of which and how knowledge was transferred over the generations? And do other people outside of Bujinkan approve that? I've to chip in here, to add in here, I think I read some articles online that there's some questionability and all of that. So I'm interested in your answer as well.
There is, but also I'm going to be upfront with you guys. I'm not the historian. There are plenty of us. There are plenty of people in the Bujinkan that are true, deep historians, and I can refer you to some information to find that out. The Hidden Lineage is one of them. Is a book that's being worked on, and I believe Paul Mass and Sean Askew are good resources for finding out more information on that. From the documents that I have seen, I can say that it has been proven, and there are plenty of records that prove it. And there are some people that are debating about whether it is or it isn't. There hasn't been a definite answer for some of the Ruhas being discussed. But at the same time, I can't read really old, outdated Japanese because they're using cursive characters that are sometimes out of place. So I literally have to go on what other historians say. And that's one of the things about a traditional martial art is that you may not understand the language that it came from or the actual fonts and texts that they use now. You're relying on secondhand information. So you have to be able to trust the historians doing their work.
Fidel, of all the styles you trained, in which style would you say is most effective for offense, and inversely, which style would you say is best for self-defense?
Offense. Man, the best defense is a good offense. I would say that this one really depends on the context because someone could easily say like, okay, do Muay Thai, but now you may have escalated a scenario and now you're going to jail because you kicked someone in the head and it bounced off the wall. Um, there are situations where like BJJ would be good for defense because you're not really harming another individual, but you may open yourself up to other individuals in a room or if that person is armed. I think every aspect of the martial art has its different ranges that it may prove superior in, but that's why I like Bujinkan because it has a little bit of everything and it's taught me to tap into the various skill sets at the different ranges. So I don't think this one has a really like surefire answer that something is the best for one or the other because it's also going to depend on the individuals and which martial arts they resonate with and their tactics and personal character.
I'll add my take as well, and this won't be like an expert take because I'm not an expert, but just the first thoughts that come to my mind when I'm thinking about offense specifically, I'm thinking striking arts can be great, like Muay Thai, kickboxing, boxing, just to punch someone in the face. But for self-defense, I think it's important, and I think most of my audience is familiar with my answer, but I think self-defense is much more than fighting. So first of all, it's all about knowing good theory, and then it's good to know how to take care of yourself on the ground. It's good to know how to deal with strikes, so it's good to learn this and that, but I don't think there's one particular martial art which tackles that, but there are, which I think they're rare. But did you want to say Bujinkan?
I think parkour might be pretty good in that self-defense portion.
Yeah, I guess, but also too, they probably won't talk about it. I think my ideal suggestion for everyone would be to find a very, very good self-defense school which does everything, like the pressure testing, improvised weapons, but they're so rare that it's I can't in a way recommend it. So yeah, but any pressure tested martial art is still a good beginning. But yeah, anyway, it's not a full answer, but just my opinion. We could go forever there, but I'll just pop up a couple of other questions, and I think we'll be wrapping up soon. So, Crushing Nihilism is saying, is Bujinkan Puritanism the result of American integration, or does this attitude occur elsewhere?
Are they? I'm trying to like. I guess. Can you use it in a sentence? Puritanism.
Sorry?
I'm it means that they have a stylistic dogma of Bujinkan is the one and only way, and all other martial arts are like not good. That's my assumption as to what they're trying to say. But I I don't really view that, and I don't know many Bujinkan practitioners that do. And if they do, they're probably drinking the Kool-Aid of someone. So I don't think that really happens too much inside America from my experiences. And I can't vouch for not America yet. I haven't been out of country yet.
Julian is asking, what would you recommend for me to focus on when I experience Bujinkan?
That is a good question. Hopefully, I would like to say all of this in like it's a good school. So hopefully, focus on the context of the situation, saying whether it's being taught as combat or self defense or as a philosophy. And don't be afraid to ask questions, but I guess try not to ask too many questions where we might make the instructor feel like we're antagonizing them. And I would definitely say, like, have a few prepared questions that you may want to follow up with. I feel like it's a little hard because, like, you're putting them on the spot versus if you were, like, went in secretly and trained with the school, you can see what they would be saying normally.
Yeah,
and
sure.
see if, like, maybe 3 weeks in, they actually talk about some of the stuff they say on their website. But I feel like context is king. So looking into what they present their material and techniques as, and if they don't suggest you doing some resistance sparring or training with the technique, that you ask to see it or see how they would apply their resistance training. Because I'd hate for them to say that they do it and then they manage to not do it the day that you're in there because you're new or something of that nature.
Cool.
I feel like you'd come out with it very respective of you would like to see it being applied. So
Cool. Provocative question, but I think a good one. Why does it, so from OZ the Greater, why does it seem the only effective Bujinkan martial artist cross-train effective competition-proven martial arts?
I would assume that the situation is because, again, absorbed methodologies. And that's what I was talking about. Some of the pressure testing and sparring and application is that you sort of become inoculated to it and it's fun and you start bringing it everywhere else you go. And a lot of the forerunners of the Japanese Shihan and people who train and teach Bujinkan were all cross training. They did judo and a whole bunch of other martial arts that have that combat sports element to it while they were initially learning Bujinkan. So I felt like the early days of Bujinkan most likely had a lot of that. And then as people were traveling abroad, coming back over to learn via seminars and stuff like that, they're not seeing sparring and application in seminars. And then they're bringing back what they taught to teach people. So they didn't really get to experience the class. They experienced the dissemination of information. And I think that may have developed a habit. And you don't see, pressure testing in not in seminars as much because they're all about giving you the information while you're there, giving you the bang for your buck, and then they expect you to go home and train and apply this kind of stuff. So I feel like that might be an underlying reason why some of those things may have popped up.
And Judo Chop, have you pulled off Bujinkan moves in BJJ training on anyone higher grades before learning BJJ?
Absolutely. But also the fun thing about it is, again, BJJ is Newaza, so a lot of the moves that they have in BJJ we've already had in Nimpo. So I've landed Americana before I knew it was called Americana on people. I've done armbar before I knew it was an armbar. It was Jujigatame. So I've learned a lot of my ground fighting from Nimpo first, going into BJJ, and I have pulled off several techniques from Nimpo and BJJ. Yes.
Cool. And okay, I think we're running into the last ones. So Borgzilla, I actually haven't. I think it looks like a good question. Haven't had a chance to dig into it. When you say learn methodologies, are you saying that the learn methodologies from the competition Peruvian martial arts are more effective in teaching practical habits?
So when I say learning methodologies, it's more so how people take in new information. There's been so much learned within like the last century about how to best teach people. And I fancy education. So I go out of my way to learn that in the psychology of how to best help people learn. And I feel that most combative sports focus on the Socratic method of learning, where they focus on having fun and applying things in dynamic situations, which help you reinforce neural connections stronger and a bit more quickly. So this is again why pressure testing and utilizing those skill sets or drills help people learn things more effectively. It's not only because it's getting them inoculated to the stress, but it's been proven scientifically to help people retain information more through physical practice. So it's that kind of stuff that I go out of my way to incorporate when I find a new drill, just like Rokas was mentioning earlier about the people playing knife hunt. It sounds like a fun thing. I'd give it a go. I see what we can learn from it and the fallacies of the drill and help people to improve knowing what they're training for. So it's that kind of stuff when I'm talking about learned methodologies, not necessarily something being more effective, but adding to what I already do.
And an interesting question from Black Mantle: is it common for a Bujinkan practitioner to be a fan of Japanese culture, example, anime, manga, culture, food, or are they just drawn to the style because of what it offers?
I think it's a bit of both. Most of the people that I've met in the Bujinkan are a lot older than I am, and they don't read or watch anime and manga. A lot of the newer generation do, but I think that's almost with everything. There's seldom someone my age that hasn't watched or been into anime and stuff. And I think that it's a little bit of both. There are people that like what it may have to offer. They feel like they may be, as Kirk likes to call them, weeaboos.
You're talking to the knight. You're asking what the knight thinks of Japanese swords. I'm not pretty sure what you expect me to say.
So there's a bit of that culture in, I think, anything Japanese these days. And when my one student went to go train abroad in China, there were people that were like, "Wait, you studying that? How?" Like it. We thought it was like fictional. So there's a lot of mixed information about there about like how it's connected and stuff.
So we've taken quite a bit of time. So
Can I ask you a question, Rokas?
yeah, sure, go.
Well, after all this discussion and stuff, like again, I watched your videos with open mind, and you gave me sort of like a few action items to help people reflect about their own Bujinkan training and to hopefully help them step up across the board.
Oh, that's a good timing. I'm sure George will be back any moment. In case he takes a few minutes, if guys are interested. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a cliffhanger.
Yeah, I think my camera is getting a little hot. This is the longest I've used it, approaching 3 hours. But what I was getting ready to say is that I feel that while watching your videos and everything, I've gone through the approach of having some action items to help people either improve their Bujinkan training and instruction, or how to gauge whether they're getting what they're seeking in a Bujinkan school. And with that, I just wanted to say, like, from your interactions, checking out some of my content and possibly some of the other Bujinkan practitioner contents out there, how has that maybe affected your view on the Bujinkan?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to see more examples of pressure testing. I'm a big fan of pressure testing. So it was good to see some of the videos where you do sparring, weapon sparring, or just rolling and playing with it. So I appreciate that, and again, happy to see it. That proves, I guess, in a way, that proves to me that there are people who are doing it, even if they're not. You did publish some videos, but those were not the videos
Yeah,
out there.
they're mostly instructional, and then
Mm.
I have some up for entertainment. I like doing fight scene stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, so it's good to see, and it kind of proves that there's probably more people who are doing it, but they're just not putting themselves out there. So that's kind of a reminder that, yeah, there are those, in a way. I guess it would be fair to say outliers, because the majority doesn't seem to go that way. But one way or another, it's good to see that. Um, I'm thinking what else. My mind is not working as well as it worked 3 hours ago. If you want to drive me back on track, just throw me a question again.
Just
I'll-
kind of feel, I guess, like after our interaction, how may have your opinion on the Bujinkan have changed, or
Hmm.
what you may have learned from the experience?
Mhm. Um, I would be very interested and enthusiastic to see more and more people pop up who are pressure testing, or even like what we discussed about the element of talking about the awareness and putting out. If that's a key element of Bujinkan, I would want to see more of those videos. In regards to saying that I changed my opinion in some clear way, I wouldn't say that there was a big change. Uh, because again, we looked at your specific case, and you described a lot about what you train, and I think what I was expecting from this conversation was that we will probably discover that we're more on the same page than not, because a lot of the things get miscommunicated through videos, and I had a feeling that probably we'll talk and we'll see, okay, we agree on this part, we agree on this part, and there were a lot of parts we agreed upon. But yet again, I think when you described your experience and what you do with your school, that's still different from what I see and think about the majority of Bujinkan. In order for me to change my opinion of Bujinkan as a majority, I would still want more
The
people.
collective to step up.
Yeah, and you
Like,
you made that point, that which is feedback that I've gotten already before, so I didn't respond right away, but I can actually address that right now. Where you mentioned, where I asked you what's the difference between our opinions, and you said that that generalization, essentially, throwing the whole organization under the same in the same pot, and it's in one of those, in the very first episode of Martial Arts Journey Versus, I got that argument as well, and I think I listened to it, and I thought, okay, you know what? I'll be more articulate in the future. So that feedback I already listened to, and I made that change, and will be making that change, where I will do my best to, whenever I make a video, to make it clear, okay, this particular school that I looked at, this particular school, that it's not necessarily the whole, but at the same time, so I'll make sure to address that. But at the same time, I can't say that I don't see that. I I don't think it's entirely unfair to have a general consideration of a martial art. Like there's general outline for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There's a general outline for boxing. It's
Yeah.
hard not to throw something into the same pot. And I think it's important to make sure to say this is not everything. But I don't think it's entirely also a sin or wrong to have a general opinion. And again, for a general opinion, for a general change in the opinion of my opinion about Bujinkan, I still would want more clear proof from different locations.
So as my brother said in this, it was like pretty much when you made the claim, it didn't really bother the people that knew that they were already training correctly. It
Hmm.
bothered the people that had some of the insecurities in their own training.
Hmm.
And I wanted to take this step up to discuss this with you because I'm essentially trying to use this as a stepping stone to help the members of the organization to reflect about their training and to help step it up. And I like, again, I want to hopefully use this to develop momentum for more Bujinkan practitioners to put out content to show what we're about in that sense. And I've already taken some notes about like future videos to work on to hopefully address some of this and inspire others to follow suit, to, again, as you say, properly reflect the group by having more of the group do this, not just myself or other small group individuals.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that, and all in all, I appreciate as well you jumping in here. As I acknowledged in the beginning, it to some degree it's risky putting ourselves out there, and we never know what we're going to get out of these conversations. But I appreciate you trusting me and being open to discuss about it. I appreciate you also being open to continue this exploring the subject through your channel and through your work. So that's very cool, and I appreciate you pressure testing and cross training. And we lost George again. I'm sure we'll get him back in a second. Otherwise, I would have said to everyone, feel free to ask me any random questions about my love life or anything. I'm sure everyone's interested. I'm just joking. Anyway, sorry you're back. I was keeping people entertained. So I appreciate you pressure testing, cross training. You're not entirely or necessarily the person that I was targeting with that video, which you kind of also pointed out. But still, we're having this discussion. And I have like this final question that I like to ask all my guests. It's kind of almost like a trick question, but what's your summary of this 3-hour conversation?
The summary of this conversation is that we feel like there should be a decent standard to look at a martial arts with, to tell whether it is training for sports, self-defense, and running different schools through that, to help the public best know what they're getting involved with in their search for a specific product. And I think that is useful. It will help people get what they're searching for a little bit more effectively. And it'll also make instructors make sure that they're stepping up to the plate to offer what they say that they're doing. And we agreed on a lot, and we had a lot of discussion about the finer points. Is like, I like sparring, but I also want people to be mindful of sparring's flaws and why they should supplement it with other things as well. It's not the end-all be-all, but a lot of people put it as the end-all be-all for stuff. And I like it. I think everyone needs to do it. It's just recognize it for what it is and recognize it for what it's not.
Cool. So what would ninjas do? YouTube channel. People go check out your. I encourage people to go check out your stuff. Also, when you will release some of the pressure testing, rolling awareness videos or something that we discussed about, feel free to, or just send them my way to my email. I'll probably just share them in my community page, so we would get some traction there and continue the kind of global conversation that way.
Okay, cool. I appreciate it.
Cool.
It was nice talking, Rokas. Hopefully this, I guess, won't be the last time I hear from you. Like, again, if you find yourself in Baltimore or whatever, hit me up. I think it would be fun. I got several people that you'd probably enjoy having the opportunity to train with, and likewise.
Sounds like you're trying to jump with that.
Cool.
Oh my gosh.
Cool. Well, I'll say to everyone as well, thank you for watching. And some people stayed for the whole 3 hours. That's impressive. You deserve a drink. so thank you to everyone. I'll click the end broadcast button.